Chapter 1633. The reason Yu revealed his identity to True Saint by 2 wasn't because he couldn't transform back, but because of the Western Wasteland. What he needed to do next required great support from the Western Wasteland. He had to erase the unknown fear and wariness in the Western Wasteland Great Emperor's heart. Thinking about it, Yu changing his appearance and impersonating the Dark Ruler to enter the desolate region might have some flaws. With Yu's current status and importance in the Western Wasteland, revealing his identity shouldn't be too risky. Rather than being suspected by the Western Wasteland in the future and failing at the last step, he might as well take the initiative to clear the mines now. At worst, he could just abandon his identity as Marquis Loyal Marshal. As the little blue lamp had warned him before he left, 30 years was an incomparably short period of time. There was no room for mistakes. He could walk down a more difficult and thorny road, but he couldn't walk down a relatively flat road and only discover a fatal problem halfway through. A carriage quietly stopped in the wilderness. Yu pushed open the door and rubbed his temples. I've obtained my new identity, but we aren't in a hurry to leave. I still have something to do. Little Meaty frowned. Where to? Ironthorn City. 6 years had passed since the storm at the Western Border Army Camp. Ironthorn City, which had always been jittery, had returned to its former tranquility because it was used to seeing heads rolling on the ground. The only thing that made the people of the city sigh with emotion was that the Wong family residence was now in ruins. In the past, the Wong family was one of the highest-ranked families in Ironthorn City. They enjoyed wealth and glory for generations, but who would have thought that they would be embroiled in a high-level struggle of the border army, causing the deaths of hundreds of people in the entire family. Wong Kai had become a headless ghost in the underworld, but many elders in Ironthorn City still cursed and poked at his back. They used him as a negative example to educate their children. They said that he was an evil creature who had forgotten his ancestors and destroyed the entire Wong family for his own selfish desires. Even after his death, he would still be burned. Another change wasn't too conspicuous. The black iron wine was still being sold, but from the brewing workshop to the retail store, everything had changed. That charming woman who had provoked countless men in the city and caused them to suffer from the evil hands of her family's yikshaws was now missing. Many of the men who were still drinking the black iron wine couldn't help but sigh when they thought about it. Without that woman to accompany the wine, they couldn't help but feel refreshed when they drank. Some people said that the woman married a young man who came to the border to make a living. He was tall and strong, and one could tell at a glance that he was the kind of person who could cause trouble. He also had a few taels of silver in his hands. Thus, he was raised in the courtyard and rarely showed his face in public. This made many talkative border town women snort disdainfully. They said that no matter how they looked at it, that lascivious hussy didn't have a happy life, and that such a plausible rumor could never be trusted. On this day, a carriage stopped outside the shop that sold black iron wine. The reason why it attracted everyone's attention was because the driver was a woman. Most of the people in the borderlands were ferocious, so it wasn't rare for a woman to drive a carriage. However, the woman in front of him was dressed in a white robe. Although only her eyes were exposed, they still couldn't conceal her fiery charm. There were burning gazes, but no one dared to act recklessly. The borderlands of the Empire had never been peaceful, and it was normal for people to die. As long as it didn't cause too much of a commotion, the soldiers didn't like to meddle in other people's business. The woman's carriage looked travel-worn. Since it could smoothly arrive at Ironthorn City, it in itself was a kind of invisible deterrence. The carriage stopped, and the door opened. A young man walked out. His aura was restrained, and his expression was calm. However, there was a hint of calmness in his every movement. The surrounding gazes fell on the white-robed woman like a mouse seeing an old cat, and they immediately withdrew. It wasn't a good thing to say, but it was an essential skill to make a living in the borderlands. Only a blind person wouldn't be able to see that this young man wasn't someone to be trifled with. It was likely that he could pull everyone's head off without blinking. He approached the wine shop and found the owner. No one knew what he said, but he quickly turned around and bid farewell. The carriage slowly drove away and disappeared from everyone's sight. 2 hours later, the carriage stopped outside an inconspicuous small courtyard in the north of Ironthorn City. This time, the man didn't appear. The white-robed woman jumped off the carriage and knocked on the door. There seemed to be no one in the courtyard. The white-robed woman knocked for a long time, but there was no response. Just as she furrowed her eyebrows and a chill appeared in the air around her, a man's calm voice echoed out from the carriage. "Good. Since he isn't here, let's go." The white-robed woman respectfully nodded. She returned to the carriage, pulled on the reins, and slowly left. In the small courtyard, on the bed in the room, lying in a man's arms, the woman's long dress had mostly fallen off. Her face flushed with excitement, then paled. Her eyes were filled with panic. The man in front of her was tall, and he was also capable of tossing and turning. But he wasn't someone who came to the border to make a living, but someone who came from the border army. He was one of the interrogators who had been ordered to investigate the assassination of Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin. Afterwards, he found the woman. It was unknown what agreement the two came to, but she was soon removed from the eyes of all parties and raised in this small courtyard. "I'm afraid," the woman's voice trembled. Her snow-white chest was tightly pressed against the man's body. Her arms wrapped around his neck like snakes, her body shivering. The interrogator frowned, his complexion gloomy. "There's no need to be afraid. What happened in the past has already been settled. No one will have the patience to deal with you. I'll wait 6 years before I make a move." Puff. With a dull thud, the interrogator's eyes widened. Thick blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. A bloody hole had been torn open on his back. His heart was in the woman's hand, still beating unwillingly as it spat out massive amounts of blood. She casually pushed the interrogator onto the bed and stood up. She didn't care at all about her exposed body. She slowly said, "You're right, but I should still be a bit more careful. I can't rely on a fluke in my heart. I've used you to hide for several years, but now I must leave." She blinked, a charming smile on her face. "I'll take 6 years of service in exchange for your heart today. That's quite fair." She tossed the heart into her mouth. As she chewed, she fell to the floor dead. A moment later, space twisted and a translucent shadow appeared in the room. Looking around, he muttered, "There's no one here. Could it be that I'm being too cautious?" Just as her voice fell, the translucent shadow froze in place. Little Meaty grabbed onto her neck. Her eyes swept over the blood on the bed, and she frowned. Her grip tightened. "Kill it." Qin Yu's voice echoed in her ears. Without hesitation, Little Meaty clenched her fingers. With a dull puff, a high-quality Yin spirit was extinguished. Shwa! Little Meaty's figure vanished. She returned to the carriage that had already left Ironthorn City. As she carefully wiped her hands with gauze, she frowned. Qin Yu smiled apologetically. "I've troubled you. After all, you are the most suitable person to deal with this matter. Those who are more capable do more work." Was this praise? Little Meaty rolled her eyes. "Stop. I don't want to touch this sort of dirty work in the future. I still find it disgusting." Qin Yu smiled. He didn't argue with her any further. He lightly said, "Now, I have an approximate idea of Wu Tongtian's background. The commander of the Western Border Army, the one who controlled 40% of the Empire's border armies, the one who truly deserved to be called a super boss of the military, was actually one of them. How interesting." A sharp light burst out from deep within Qin Yu's eyes. He had wasted precious time going to Ironthorn City and deliberately alerting the enemy. Of course, it wasn't because he was bored. Between him and the Western Wilds, they were simply using each other. No matter what happened, there would always be some harvest in the future once this matter was revealed. Heaven-pulling sect. Within the borders of the Western Wilds, the influence of sects declined with each passing day. They had fallen to the top of the ruling class. Although this was an indisputable fact, this didn't mean that the cultivators within the sects lived difficult lives. In fact, compared to the vast number of living beings beneath the heavens, the cultivators of these sects were absolutely superior. As for the famous heaven-pulling sect in the northwestern region of the Empire, because their ancestor was a half-emperor Taoist heaven-pulling Taoist, Even though he had long since decayed and died, the connections and foundation he left behind still made the heaven-pulling sect a cut above the rest. In recent years, the heaven-pulling sect's ancestral hall had been incomparably excited because they had found a peerless jade. After several years of cultivation, there was no doubt that their foresight had been proven. The entire sect viewed this person as a treasure and had high hopes for him. It was said that 2 years ago, when the sect leader was drunk, he had boasted that within 100 years, the heaven-pulling sect would have a peak ruler. He had even said that he would be able to cross the threshold of the Emperor realm within 200 years. Once this was achieved, the heaven-pulling sect would be able to restore the status and glory of their ancestors. They would then be able to ascend to the heavens in a single step and replace the position of the demonic sect. They would become the new leader of all the sects in the world. They might even be able to reverse the current situation where the sect's influence was declining like the setting sun, and lead the sects and factions back to the top of the ruling class. At that time, all the sects and factions in the world would owe great karma to the heaven-pulling sect. This was all to ensure that the sect's legacy could be passed down for tens of thousands of years. 6 years was enough for a 12-year-old youth to become an elegant young master. Not to mention that Yu hadn't grown crooked in the slightest. Now he stood on the mountain peak in his white robes, fluttering in the wind like an immortal. It was as if he were a true immortal who had descended to this world. The female cultivators of the heaven-pulling sect looked at him with infatuation. If there were peach blossoms here, they would probably be in full bloom all year round. Sigh. Yu, who looked like a young man, sighed. His brows furrowed slightly, and there was a hint of worry on his face. His frown almost shattered the hearts of his senior and junior sisters. A female cultivator in a white dress of the same style, who was as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as the moon, took a step forward and said softly, "Junior brother Yu, what's wrong? If there's something bothering you, you can tell me. Maybe I can help you solve your problems." Yu faintly smiled. He turned around and said, "I see how enchanting the Green Mountains are. It's just that autumn is gradually approaching, and there will be a day when the mountains will wither and turn yellow. I feel a bit emotional." The senior sister in the white dress smiled. "How difficult can that be? I will go back and report to the sect so that the old ancestor can use a supernatural power to prevent the bitter cold of autumn and winter, allowing the mountains to remain green all year round." Yu shook his head. "Thank you for your good intentions, senior sister, but life and death are the principles of the heavenly Tao. How can I easily interfere with it?" He shook his head again, helplessness on his face. "What will come will come. How can I hide from it?" As he finished speaking, Yu revealed a smile. He cupped his hands towards his senior and junior sisters and took a step forward. "I have a guest who has arrived. I will be leaving first." His figure flew far away, like a white rainbow disappearing in the blink of an eye. The women behind him were even more dazzled, and they wanted to pull him into their arms and cherish him. After several breaths of time, the white rainbow came to a stop and rolled to the ground. Yu, overflowing with the aura of an immortal, knelt on the ground with a thud and respectfully kowtowed. Yu greets master. The car door opened. Yu sat inside and sneered. "If you don't greet me, you won't have to face me? Yu, what do you think I should do with you?" Yu faintly smiled. At this moment, the sky was bright and beautiful, and it seemed as if all things in the world had come to life. "Madam, the past is the past. Since we are all still alive, we should look forward. Leave me and pretend that nothing has happened. That is the best choice, especially now that Master is very pressed for time. Only with my help will you be able to step into the Emperor realm as soon as possible." His tone was calm, as if victory was already in his grasp. Little Rose lips curled up, her eyes cold. "It seems that you are very confident." Chapter 1634. Yu kowtowed again. "Master, I was wrong before. Today, Yu swears that I will never have the slightest thought of offending you in the future. I ask that you be magnanimous and give me a chance to turn over a new leaf." There was silence. Yu knelt on the ground. His face paled and beads of sweat covered his forehead. As his white robes were nearly soaked through, Chinyu finally spoke up. Chinyu, I've thought about it carefully. In truth, swallowing you isn't a bad choice. His expression was calm, not revealing any of his inner thoughts. After all, you also said that I am short on time. So the fastest way to increase my strength is a good way. What do you think? Chinyu's body shivered. He finally couldn't hold himself back any longer. He looked up to reveal a crying face. Master, please don't. I was born sloppy, and I often don't wash my feet for a year and a half. Moreover, I don't eat regularly, and I like to gorge myself on food and drink, so I suffer from constipation all year round. If you eat me, that would be blasphemy and irresponsibility towards yourself. I absolutely won't allow you to ruin yourself like this. Little Meaty coldly sneered. It doesn't matter. I am very good at washing myself. Even if you jump into a pit of shit and soak in it for 3 to 5 years, I can still turn you into a delicious feast. She looked at Chinyu, her eyes eager to try. Chinyu thought for a moment. Chinyu was so scared that he peed himself. His nose was covered with snot and tears. He no longer had the demeanor of a banished immortal. Instead, he cried in a pitiful manner that moved one's expression. Master, I know I was wrong. Please give me a chance. Give me another chance. Chinyu reached out a hand, silently looking at him. Chinyu's eyes are very red. He blinks a few times. His tears are falling down with a pitter-patter. If you continue to play dumb, you really will die. Oh, Chinyu wiped his tears. He reached out a hand and slapped between his eyebrows. A mass of light flew out, and his complexion paled. Chinyu reached out a hand, and the mass of light fell into his hand, disappearing without a trace. You said it yourself. This is your last chance. If you let me sense anything else, you can prepare an elegiac couplet ahead of time. The carriage door closed. Baiji turned her horse around and slowly rode into the distance. Chinyu stood up and gently sighed. Honorable master, come out. You can't even hide from me, much less them. Shwa, shwa. 5 figures appeared at the same time. There were men and women, young and old, but all of their auras were obscure and deep, and their eyes were ghastly. That's right, they're all Chinyu's teachers. In the past, when a peerless piece of jade fell from the sky, the hall of the founders of the Heaven Pulling School almost had an internal strife. Unable to come to an agreement, no one was willing to give up. Thus, with a wave of his hand, the sect leader decided that everyone would teach him together. That was why there were these 5 masters. Of course, the sect leader of the heaven-plucking sect was definitely one of them. Chinyu, who are they? Chinyu crawled up and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. It's someone our heaven-pulling sect absolutely cannot afford to offend. His words caused the 5 heaven-plucking sect elders to choke and roll their eyes at the same time. One of them, who looked to be in her 30s, walked over and touched Chinyu's head. Is he really that strong? My disciple has never suffered such injustice. I really can't swallow this. Chinyu sighed. He helplessly said, A true man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. Let's endure this. He swept his eyes over the 5 heaven-plucking sect elders in front of him. His tone was earnest. I'm serious. Let's just forget about this. Don't go to your death and drag me down with you. His tone was unkind, but the 5 people from the heaven-plucking sect seemed used to it. It was as if he was used to it and wasn't angry at all. However, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. They had sensed that Chinyu was different, otherwise they wouldn't have such confidence in him. They wouldn't have believed that he would be able to reach the Emperor realm. If even they feared him, just who were the man and woman in the carriage? Within the carriage, Chinyu opened his eyes, a cold light flashing in them. Little Meaty said, That little fellow is truly afraid. That's why he called them over. Her lips curved up in a smile. Don't worry. The people of the heaven-plucking sect definitely won't dare to do anything. Moreover, even if they did, would they be afraid that I would hold on? Chinyu nodded. Little Meaty glanced at him. Chinyu is right. For you, him being alive is the best result. Eating him isn't impossible, but you and I both know that is just to scare him. Eating him was easy, but digesting him was far too difficult. But Chinyu only had 30 years. Otherwise, this could be considered a good way to rapidly increase his cultivation. Qin Yu said, "He was born as a spirit embryo of the heavens and earth, possessing great destiny and great karma. Now that he has become my vassal, it's normal for him to be unwilling. So, I will allow him to fight for himself once. But only once. Otherwise, I won't eat him and will instead give him to you. I believe that will be of some benefit to you." Little Meaty licked her lips. "Then I won't try to persuade you otherwise." Her eyes brightened with anticipation. In the heaven-plucking sect, Qin Yu's lips suddenly twitched after he broke away from his 5 masters. A bitter smile appeared on his pale face. Deep in his eyes, a ruthless and awe-inspiring light appeared. But there was also an irrepressible fear mixed in. Qin Yu was serious. He really did have the thought of giving him to Little Meaty. If he really fell into that person's mouth, no matter how difficult it was to kill him, he would really die. Ha! He lifted a hand and slapped his forehead. Qin Yu fell to the ground, wildly rolling back and forth as he howled in anguish. "My life is bitter. My life is really bitter. My fate. Why is it so difficult to cross south?" He flipped over and pointed a finger upwards. "Useless trash. That's right. What are you looking at? I'm talking about you. That was such a good plan, and you could have killed him with your eyes closed. But in the end, you were completely destroyed by that person, and you even suffered a loss in silence. You will have to endure for 30 years before you can speak again. What are you staring at me for? Even if you stare at me, you useless trash." Bang! In the skies above the heaven-plucking sect, a bolt of heavenly thunder appeared out of nowhere. It crashed into Qin Yu's residence and knocked him down. His hair stood on end, and his entire body was scorched black. The members of the heaven-plucking sect hurried, over with fear still lingering in their hearts. They saw Qin Yu flipping over and pointing his middle finger at the skies. "You bastard! If you have the ability, then kill me. Otherwise, I will curse you every day." He was full of energy, and his previously dispirited aura had miraculously recovered after being struck by the heavenly thunder. This left the heaven-plucking sect master and the others stunned for a moment. Then they felt gratified. This disciple of theirs was truly talented. However, as they thought of the man and woman in the carriage, they couldn't help but feel a bit gloomy. Just what had Qin Yu handed over? Our heaven-plucking sex Yu Pu, the future leader of our sect, how could he recognize someone else as his master? Although we agreed not to attack, our heaven-plucking sect has a wide network of friends and connections. Shouldn't we give it a try? After all, we didn't attack, so we didn't go back on our promise. Unfortunately, the young man and woman in the carriage didn't give the heaven-plucking sect a chance to beat around the bush. They circled around the mountain forest several times before their whereabouts were unknown. Even though the heaven-plucking sect used their sect's great array to secretly track them, they still couldn't find them. His whereabouts were still thrown off cleanly. Thousand Islands Prefecture. The blue waters of the Great Lake stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Countless islands dotted the lake. Although Chongdao was long enough, in terms of its landform, it was not eye-catching at all. According to Lord Min, the reason why he chose this island was that the name of this island also happened to have the word long in it. The word long was a good word, especially for a man. Either word was good. That was why he spent a lot of money and signed in the government office of the Thousand Islands Prefecture. Then this island had a new master. Of course, the one who acted was definitely not Lord Min. He was very experienced in doing such things and would definitely not expose his whereabouts. After all, this time he had abandoned his base in the imperial capital and moved to the Thousand Islands Prefecture in order to hide from the madam in the Marquis's mansion. The Thousand Islands Prefecture was still in chaos. Lord Min also chose Chongdao. According to him, he could sleep peacefully and work there for hundreds of years without any worries. When the limelight was completely over and he got tired of the rural life, he would move back to the big city and continue to live as a rich man who enjoyed his life in peace. TSK, this was how a happy life was. As for his only son who was still depressed and hadn't walked out of the pain of love, how many years had it been? Didn't it just mean that my son was a sentimental person? The longer he immersed himself in love, the more he would come back to his senses and let go. Then, he would truly be enlightened and wouldn't be troubled by love. This was the advantage of living a long life. He didn't have to worry about wasting his best years and delaying the cultivation of immortality, because my son was born with a long life. Thinking of this, old Master Min was very pleased. Which of those old fogies who bared their fangs at him back then had this ability? Only he could have such a promising son. When Min Xiangtai grew up, the father and son would join forces to cut through gold. Who could stop them? However, Lord Min, who had enjoyed a peaceful life for a few years and ate a bowl of old wontons when he was free, began to lose his wits shortly after he went fishing on the boat today. In the past, he would miss the wontons so much that he would get anxious if he didn't eat them for a day. Even when the slender girls served them to him, he couldn't lift his spirits. After taking a few bites, Lord Min forced a smile. "I'm not feeling well today. I'm going back." The big boat hurried back. The breakfast stall owner, who had now become a member of Lord Min's kitchen, hesitated slightly before bowing. He said softly, "Old master." Min Zhongjing waved his hand. "This has nothing to do with you." He looked up at the sky, his face full of helplessness and sorrow. "I thought that my family's ability to deceive the world was already top-notch, but I still underestimated the heroes of the world. Difficult? It's really too difficult to live." Chef rubbed his hands and said after a long time, "Why don't I ask Big Girl to come over and massage Old Master's shoulders to make you feel better?" Old Master Min glared at him. "If there's nothing else, then scram. Stop talking nonsense here. I'm going to leave Big Girl for Xiangtai." But he couldn't help but linger a little in his eyes. He thought to himself, "Min Xiangtai, this little bastard, to be able to reincarnate as my son. He really has accumulated 80,000 lifetimes of good fortune." Chef laughed foolishly. "Whatever you say, old master. I'll get lost then." He left happily. He was in good mood. If Big Girl could follow young master, that would really be a great fortune. The journey was smooth sailing. The big boat docked at the pier. Old Master Min went ashore with a gloomy face. He immediately saw Gosheng waiting respectfully at the pier. His face was pale, but there was a hint of unnatural redness. He became more and more skinny, like a thin dog that had been starved for a few years. But his eyes were especially bright, flashing with a light that made one's heart palpitate. Chapter 1635. I'm Gosheng, a dog under Madam's feet. I took the liberty to come to Changdao today. Please save my life. Gosheng bowed respectfully and spoke respectfully. Then, in the next moment, he directly fainted. Lord Min's face was livid. He wished he could kill this little bastard who called himself a dog right here and now, so that he wouldn't feel disgusted in front of him. But after thinking about it, he didn't dare to do it. After all, it was up to the master to beat a dog, not to mention the words of the master. This time, he couldn't avoid the eyes of that madam. Even if he was more cautious, he wasn't sure he could avoid it next time. What a sin. Lord Min smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "Take this guy home. Be gentle. He's dying." As it turned out, Master Min had overestimated Gosheng. How could he still have half a breath? He was clearly hanging on by a thread. After being lifted up and tossed around, coupled with the fact that he had relaxed his mind after reaching his destination, he looked like he was about to breathe his last after a few steps. Lord Min was scared and hurriedly asked his servants to put him down. He pinched Gosheng's philtrum and patted his chest. Seeing that it didn't work, he bit his cheek and took out a small jade bottle. He poured out an elixir and carefully rubbed some powder on the corner of Gosheng's mouth. This damn short-lived guy. He should have died long ago. Why did he come to me? Isn't it good to die? He should be reincarnated into a good family in his next life. Feeling indignant and distressed, Lord Min flicked his sleeves and left. The servants hurriedly carried Gosheng and followed him from a distance. Walking in front of him, Lord Min's eyes were gloomy. Lightning flashed in the depths of his eyes from time to time. Dog's Leftovers. What an amazing name. Thinking of this guy's background and why he ended up like this, Lord Min thought about his name. Thinking about his name, Min Chongjing wished he could turn around and slap him into pieces right now. What did that madam want to do? Did she really think that he wouldn't dare to kill her? One day later, Goshen woke up. His first words made the gloomy Lord Min break out in a cold sweat on his forehead. Madam deliberately told me to wait a day. Her original words were that if you killed me, she would personally kill your son. Old Master Min was terrified. If Gosheng was killed, of course, he wouldn't be able to hear this, and if he wasn't prepared, he definitely wouldn't be able to stop that madam. His gaze was like a torch, truly like a torch. The secret that he had hidden for so many years was quietly grasped in his hands. As for that **** leftover, he was truly a dog. To think that he wasn't afraid of death and would still do as he was told. Cough. Gosheng, it's hard for you to recover from your injuries in a short period of time. We still need to think about it in the long run. Old Master Min was sincere. Gosheng bowed respectfully. Everything will be done, as you say. This lowly one has no objections. Western Wilderness, Flowing Light City. As one of the 108 main cities, it was famous for producing a special construction material called the flowing light tile. Under the sunlight, this kind of tile could reflect a myriad of splendor, but its true use was naturally not just to look good. The flowing light tile could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and use it to pave the roof. It was naturally a spirit-gathering formation and was the favorite item of high-class immortals and rich families. It could show off their family's foundation. Simply put, this thing had a high status. Therefore, even if it had the same effect, the cost was several times higher than ordinary spirit-gathering formations. But it was still extremely popular and was even sold as far as the Eastern Wilderness. Because of its wealth, the scale of the Flowing Light City's transmission formation was particularly large. The soldiers stationed there were all in shiny armor, and the weapons in their hands emitted a cold aura. With one glance, one could tell that it was an extraordinary item. According to the words of the old people of Flowing Light City, in terms of face, the several city lords of Flowing Light City were all the ancestors of this path. Otherwise, they would not be able to sell the flowing light tiles at such a sky-high price and not worry about the market at all. Next to the transmission formation of the imperial capital. Now, there was a group of people waiting. Most of them were silent, but their bearing and bearing were extraordinary. After all, not to mention the cost of entering the imperial capital's transmission formation, just the right to use it was enough to make many people shrink back. Even so, a routine inspection was essential, and it was also extremely strict. Greetings to the three of you. Are you all here together? The soldier responsible for inspecting them asked with a smile. His attitude was very good. Shinya nodded. That's right. My wife and my wife's maid. The soldier's attitude became increasingly gentle. Here are your proof of identity. He took it and carefully looked over it. There was no problem. His eyes fell on Baiji. Old Master Qin, there is no problem with your proof of identity. But, according to the rules, those who enter the imperial capital's transmission formation must reveal their true appearance. This wasn't a major matter. Qin Yu had already intended to have Baiji pull down her white veil. But at this moment, there was a sneer from the side. Sir, there is a lowly maid next to you, and she still has a white veil covering her face. Isn't it a bit inappropriate for my wife to take off her veil first? The one who glanced over was a young sir. He wore embroidered robes and held a folding fan in his hands, overbearing and arrogant. Although he called himself sir, there was no respect in his tone at all. Qin Yu frowned. Before entering the transmission formation area to wait, the two of them had met face to face. At that time, this young sir's attitude was gentle and polite. Compared to now, it could be called the difference between the heavens and earth. But when he was repeatedly refused by Little Meaty's side, his expression began to darken. If it weren't for the fact that this person didn't dare to act recklessly in the teleportation formation, the few strong and muscular bodyguards beside him would have long since made their move. Qin Yu had experienced the power of the words femme fatale. He didn't want to meddle in this matter, but this person had provoked him on his own initiative. Looking at Little Meaty's complexion, he felt that it was better for him to step forward. Otherwise, a minor matter could easily turn into a major matter and ruin his original plan. Although he wasn't afraid, It would only delay him. Chinyu turned around, his expression calm and his eyes calm. Young sir, when you go out, have the elders of your family not told you not to be too arrogant? Otherwise, there might come a day when you might lose your life. Why waste the good eyesight of your reincarnation? Across from him, the young sir in luxurious robes who was covered by his gaze paled. His eyes widened, revealing endless panic. It was like he had been forcefully dragged into a nightmare. Insolence! How bold! Several bodyguards were enraged. How could they not know that their young master had fallen into someone's scheme? They roared out and were about to attack, but before they could even move, they felt as if they had suffered a heavy blow. With stuffy coughs, they were forcefully suppressed where they stood, unable to move at all. Their eyes widened in horror. The guard of Flowing Light City's transmission formation was a man with keen eyesight. He hurriedly rushed over and glanced at Chinyu. He smiled and said, "My lord, please calm your anger. You should know that it is strictly forbidden to fight in the transmission formation area. Otherwise, the laws will not tolerate it." Chinyu faintly smiled and took a step back. This Lord General is right. When you're outside, it is best to abide by the laws. As he stepped back, the several people across from him felt as if they had been granted amnesty. The young sir in luxurious robes gasped for breath, awe in his eyes. But Chinyu could still sense a trace of hatred deep in his eyes. It seemed that these people all had decent backgrounds. He hesitated for a moment, but didn't do anything. They even dared to enter the Western Wasteland imperial capital. So how could they fear a mere youth? The Flowing Light City guard laughed. He cupped his hands together and said, "My lord is right. If everyone could be as magnanimous as you, we would be much more comfortable." He waved his hand and ordered several high-grade flowing light tiles to be brought over. These weren't the kind used to pave roofs, but rather were finely processed ornaments. Ordinary nobles liked to place one or two of them in their study and use them as lighting fixtures. According to the words of our city lord, this is called further processing and then selling it. It is a way to earn even more profit. Although they didn't understand, it really was a great profit. There were several companies in the city that were engaged in the deep processing of flowing light tiles, treating the city lord as a living bodhisattva. It was said that if it weren't for the city lord's stern refusal, a memorial tablet would have been erected in their temple. It isn't too expensive. It is just a little local product. I would like to give it to my lords, made as a token of our appreciation. Chinyu glanced at this guard who knew how to conduct himself. He smiled and nodded. "That's also good. Then accept it." Baiji respectfully nodded. She stepped forward and received the flowing light tile, casually putting it away. The guard didn't exchange any pleasantries. After a few words, he turned and left. Not long after he left, the transmission array was ready. Chinyu and the others cut in line, but no one had any objections to this. The pale-faced young master in luxurious robes lowered his head and followed in. This caused many people's eyes to brighten. They thought that if they moved a bit faster, they might be able to catch a good show. The transmission array lit up and the figures of everyone vanished from sight. The guard watched this from afar. At this moment, his complexion relaxed, and he let out a long breath. "General, who was that just now?" "Ruler Realm." The guard bitterly smiled. He rubbed his face. "Those big shots. Why do they have to pretend to be commoners? Fortunately, this person has a more gentle personality, otherwise something might have happened." Hiss! Several people nearby sucked in a breath of cold air. "But from what I see, that noble young master doesn't seem like he wants to keep the peace. Just a moment ago, he went with him." The guard shook his head. "The imperial capital is deep and not something our Flowing Light City can compare with. Since he isn't afraid, he must have some sort of confidence. But this has nothing to do with us. We just need to send him away. Whether or not there's a bloody fight afterwards, that's up to them." Everyone praised the general's wisdom for smoothing things out ahead of time and sending away this group of gods of plague, preventing any complications from occurring. The guard was expressionless, but he knew in his heart that this lord didn't seem like an ordinary ruler. In terms of sensing auras, he had always been extremely sensitive. Although he didn't discover anything special, he felt that this person was stronger than the city lords. No, it was more accurate to say that he was much stronger. It seemed that this noble young master from the imperial capital was willing to bow his head and admit defeat, but if he wanted to get back at them, he feared that if he wasn't careful, he would stir up a great deal of trouble. In fact, while it was true that he wanted to get back at them, there wasn't much trouble. This was because after Yu left the transmission array and arrived in the capital region, he went straight to find the guard general guarding the transmission array and showed him the token in his hand. This token couldn't indicate one's identity, but it meant that behind this person was at least a great general, and he had a massive army under his command. Please wait a moment. I will immediately pass on the message. The guard respectfully bowed and didn't dare to delay. He turned and hurried away. There was the sound of breaking air, and two figures arrived together. One of them could be considered the first person Yu had met in the western wilderness. He was General Yi from the old Yi family. The one beside him was likely the other newly promoted general of the Imperial Capital's Guard. He was an unfamiliar face. Seeing this from afar, the young master in luxurious robes who was waiting not too far away had a pale complexion. He didn't dare to have any more thoughts. He bowed from afar and left in a hurry. What nonsense! He had casually flashed a token, and two generals of the Imperial Capital's Guard had rushed over. Was such a character someone easy to provoke? A soft persimmon was easy to pinch, but something like an iron plate was an idiot who kicked it. Yi landed on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Who are you? Why do you have a military token in your hand and want me to come here to speak?" Yu flipped his hand and took out an item. "I asked General Yi to bring this item to see His Majesty. Tell him that this sinner doesn't dare to enter the palace without permission and is waiting here." He waved his hand. General Yi should not ask anything else. There are some things you need to know that knowing too much isn't necessarily a good thing. Yi complexion changed. He looked at the military token and then at the flowing lights. It was clear this wasn't an ordinary artifact. He took a deep breath and said, "All right." After receiving it, he shot into the skies and flew straight towards the imperial palace. Chapter 1636. Zhou Ming, the great eunuch who served His Majesty, had committed some sort of crime and was disliked by His Majesty. These past few years, his life had been deteriorating with each passing day. If it weren't for the fact that he was well-behaved in his early years and had some connections in the palace, he likely wouldn't have lasted until now and would have died long ago. In the past, this great eunuch was so prestigious that even the high officials of the imperial capital had to greet him with a smile. But now, he was doing the task of sweeping the imperial roads. His body was stooped, and he wore an old black cotton robe. After the cuffs were stained with oil, they were polished black and shiny. It wasn't easy for him to finish today's cleaning work. As Zhou Ming hugged the broom and gasped for breath, he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Many people were madly running towards him. Zhou Ming's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly lowered his head and retreated to the side. The rules of the palace were very strict. For such a commotion to occur, it was clear that something major had happened. With his current status, he was like a bug in the palace. If he didn't hide far away, he would die for nothing if he was trampled to death. But what happened soon made Zhou Ming feel as if he were in a dream. His lips trembled and his eyes widened. He didn't know what to say. "Godfather, what are you standing there for? His Majesty has ordered you to wash up and change your clothes to quickly wait outside the study. This time, you've really had a sweet time. In the future, let's see if anyone in the palace dares to look down on you." Surrounded by smiling faces, Zhou Ming returned to his original residence in the palace. He took a hot bath, which he hadn't had for a long time, and changed into the standard robe of a eunuch. When he arrived outside the study, Zhou Ming was still in a daze. "Oh, Eunuch Zhou Ming, you're here? His Majesty is inside and has been waiting for a long time. Hurry in and let us brothers drink and reminisce in the future." A great eunuch he was acquainted with in the past smiled and spoke from afar. But Zhou Ming could see that there was a curious look in his eyes. He couldn't understand how someone like him, who had been stuck in the mud for several years, could suddenly turn things around. But in truth, Zhou Ming didn't know either. This was why he was suddenly rejected and suppressed. And this was also why he was suddenly revived today. Taking a deep breath, Zhou Ming tried to appear calm. "I'll go see His Majesty first." After reporting, Zhou Ming bowed and quickly walked in with a heart filled with awe and apprehension. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Slave Zhou Ming greets Your Majesty." On the 9th floor, the Emperor of the West Wilderness put down the memorial and looked at him. "From today onwards, you will continue to serve the Emperor." That was all. The great Emperor didn't give an explanation. From His Majesty's point of view, there was no need to waste time. After all, the eunuchs in the palace were all servants of the royal family. Their life and death, honor and disgrace were all in his hands. Was he supposed to apologize for all these years? If he really did it, Zhou Mingkai would be scared half to death. This was the sorrow of the week, not to mention the unpredictable rise and fall of their lives. Even after the ups and downs, they still couldn't figure it out. Naturally, Zhou Ming would never have imagined that the reason why he was banished all those years ago and the sudden turnaround today were all because of the same person. And this person had already secretly met with the great Emperor of the West Wilderness and told him that he had no choice but to commit the crime of deceiving the sovereign from the very start. The specific details and process were extremely complicated, and the evidence was clear. The general summary was, after he killed the true ruler of darkness, because he yearned for the higher realm's desolate region, he impulsively impersonated someone else. In addition to his ignorance, he committed a grave mistake and ruined the West Wilderness plans in the broken world. Because of this, he didn't dare to reveal his identity. Afterwards, he was highly regarded by His Majesty and was promoted all the way to a high position. However, his heart was always anxious and restless. Now that he was plotted against and killed, he thought about it over and over again and changed his ways. He was willing to confess everything to His Majesty and ask His Majesty to be magnanimous and give him a chance to atone for his crimes. This was indeed a risk, but it wasn't because he was completely unprepared. In the capital region, he used the tiger seal to mobilize troops to ask for Yi Qin's help. Of course, this wasn't some sinner's heart was filled with fear, but rather, it was to give himself some leeway. If things really went wrong, he could follow Midi's plan and leave the Western Wilderness imperial capital, abandoning his identity as the Marquis of Loyal Marshal. This matter was placed in the open. As the saying goes, first a villain, then a gentleman. If the great Emperor of the West Wilderness could see this, he would be more willing to believe Qin Yu's story. This was related to the calculation of the human heart. It was an open and above-board plot, so there was no need to worry that it would backfire. Of course, the most important reason the great Emperor believed this was because Qin Yu's confession was true and could withstand any investigation or scrutiny. It also coincided with a mystery that had always existed in the depths of the great Emperor's heart. For instance, why did the crazed Li Siji bite the Marquis of Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, to death in the cage? His failure and his current situation were all thanks to Ning Qin. If Ning Qin wanted him dead, then it was normal for him to do so. If it were anyone else that dared to commit such a great crime of deceiving the heavens and deceiving the Emperor, the great Emperor would have already slapped them to death. But for Qin Yu, he was willing to listen and think about it. He was even willing to play the little tricks he had played before. He was willing to tolerate it. After all, a living Marquis of Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, was far more useful than a corpse, especially in the current situation. According to what Qin Yu said, everything that had happened to him in the borders of the Goliaths was all because of that race. Because of their meticulous planning, they had caused him to die once. There was a great terror between life and death. The reason the Western Wilderness Great Emperor was willing to believe Qin Yu was because he could feel an aura of death that hadn't yet faded from his body. He used the destiny of the nation to support himself and borrow the power of the heavenly Tao to ask questions. If so, it wasn't difficult to borrow a pair of all-seeing eyes. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't fully understand what was involved in reviving from the dead, but he knew that Qin Yu must have suffered a great loss because of it. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't believe a single word of it. At most, they were just using each other. Qin Yu wanted to borrow the strength of the Western Wilderness to take revenge on that race. According to what he said, he had lost half of his destiny in this life and death situation. And this thing was incomparably important to him. If he couldn't take it back, all that awaited him in the future was death. That's right, regarding this plot, Qin Yu had used Little Meaty's reminder as a reference to Li Ruhua's matter. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't easily believe this, but in the state of the all-seeing eye, he could see that there was indeed a remnant destiny on Qin Yu's body. It was weak, but it was also filled with a violent backlash. In the past, the last wisp of bloodline from the heavenly bull's horn had fused with Qin Yu, forming the reverse momentum of the nine nether swallowing the heavens. After the little blue lamp concealed itself, no one could see it. Then it retracted its strength, allowing the Western Wilderness Great Emperor to see everything clearly. He didn't know what had happened, but he took it for granted that it was a change in Qin Yu's destiny after reviving from the dead. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't know the root cause, but he could faintly feel that the current Qin Yu in that race were as incompatible as fire and water. When Qin Yu said that he had been plotted against by that race, and that half of his destiny had been taken away, it was completely consistent with this. Moreover, that race had relied on seizing destiny to rise to where they were today, so it was normal for them to do such things. Of course, the most important point was that the Western Wilderness Great Emperor had seen how the Four Claws had destroyed the Stone God tribe's totem godstone in the past. From then on, he could see that the one who had plotted to kill Marquis, Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, was indeed that race. All of this could be used as evidence to form a complete chain of evidence. In addition to what he saw with his own eyes, the Western Wilderness Great Emperor finally believed what Qin Yu had said. He agreed to forgive everything that had happened in the past, and that from now on, he and his subjects would be of one mind and one heart. Otherwise, what would have been waiting for Zhou Ming wouldn't have happened today. Instead, he feared he would have lost his head without even knowing why. However, this was called being of one heart and one mind. It was fine if he just listened. The Great Emperor felt that he had gained a much deeper understanding of Qin Yu's roots. As long as he put in some effort, it wouldn't be difficult to control Qin Yu. Before Qin Yu left the imperial capital, after the ruler and minister reached a consensus, he didn't forget to ask the Western Wasteland Great Emperor for several treasures from the palace storehouse in order to conceal his aura. This could be considered as covering up a seemingly inconspicuous but extremely critical flaw on his body. Zhou Ming happily left. After obtaining the Western Wilderness Great Emperor's personal promise, there was nothing more reassuring than this. As for the reason or explanation, he didn't think it was important. As long as he could live a happy and comfortable life, the truth wasn't important. Being a muddle-headed person wasn't necessarily a bad decision. Minor characters also had their own philosophy of survival. Regardless of whether they were sad or not, they always had their own reasons. The little eunuch Li Zhouqing walked out from the shadows. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Qin Yu has already left the imperial capital." The Western Wilderness Great Emperor thought for a moment. He slowly said, "What do you think of this person?" Li Zhouqing furrowed his eyebrows for several breaths of time. He bowed and said, "I think that at least from the current situation, Qin Yu is worthy of your Majesty's trust." The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't speak. He simply waved his hand. Li Zhouqing turned and drew back, vanishing into the shadows. He lifted a hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. Then, he took a step forwards and vanished from sight. In the next moment, he arrived at the imperial palace. Within the Thunder Pool prison, his eyes were as calm as a great lake, without the least bit of ripples. 2 hours later, accompanied by the endless roars of thunder, the Western Wilderness Great Emperor left the Thunder Pool. It was unknown what he had done or what sort of answer he had obtained from Li Siji, but his complexion was much more relaxed than before. It was just that he didn't see Li Siji, who was covered in wounds and gasping for breath in the Thunder Pool. Li Siji's eyes were blood red and filled with a gloomy coldness. If one were close enough and carefully looked into his eyes, they could faintly see that in the depths of his eyes there was a faint crescent moon hidden within. A carriage quietly drove down the road. The driver, Baiji, was still as striking as ever. Qin Yu rubbed between his eyebrows. He slowly said, "Concerning my confession, how much do you think the Western Wilderness Great Emperor believed me in the end?" Little Meat thought for a moment. "Around 7 to 8. Qin Yu nodded. "I also think so. That should be enough for now." He took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. "Now, shall we move? Let's go somewhere first." Little Meat's lips curled up in a taunting smile. "Since I've found you, you should put in some effort." Qin Yu didn't understand, but seeing that Little Meat had no intention of explaining, he didn't ask. After all, the two of them had truly gone through life and death together. He closed his eyes and began to cultivate. The countdown to 30 years had begun the moment he woke up. Now, in Qin Yu's eyes, every breath of time, every second, was precious. If he didn't want to die a miserable death, he could only do his best. Little Meat glanced at Qin Yu, who had entered a state of cultivation. Her lips curved up in a smile before she composed herself. Matters in the imperial capital weren't as simple as they seemed. When Qin Yu went to see the Western Wilderness Great Emperor, she hadn't been idling around. When she was in the imperial capital, she had faintly sensed that something was wrong, and now she finally discovered it. As for the reason that other party dared to come into contact with her, it was likely because it had sensed her current condition. Otherwise, even if it had 100 times more courage, it still wouldn't have dared to show itself. Both sides had their own needs, so they reached an agreement. As for the Western Wilderness Great Emperor, after dealing with a few more waves, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Thinking this, Little Meat licked the corners of her lips. This was because when it came to things that were old enough, she simply didn't have any resistance. As for the one hiding in the thunder pond of the Imperial Palace, it was bright red and looked extremely delicious. She reached out a hand, and a tree branch came forward on its own initiative. She casually poked it and drank several mouthfuls. She thought that with her current state, could it be that she didn't even have the ability to eat a meal? She couldn't help but feel a bit sad. When she looked at Qin Yu again, he seemed like an eyesore. "Hiss!" Qin Yu shivered and sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes flashed open. "What is it?" Little Meat coldly sneered. "It's nothing." Qin Yu shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. He was too lazy to think about why she had suddenly gone crazy. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Central Wasteland, Divine Continent. 13th floor. As the highest mountain peak of the world, the 13th floor was known as the only way to step into the highest heavens and reach the White Jade capital. It was a place that countless cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Today, the Li family's third-generation direct descendant, Li Ruhua, officially entered the 13th floor and began a new life of cultivation. There was something that greatly surpassed the Li family's expectations. Before Li Ruhua left for the 13th floor, she had already been granted the status of a family elder. For a time, she became even more dazzling. "Junior apprentice, Sister Li, I've been waiting for you here on the orders of the Tower Master." High in the heavens, a mountain peak broke through the clouds. The sunlight above was as bright as gold, illuminating the sea of clouds for 10,000 miles. The disciple of the 13th floor, Mingzhe, smiled and said. He was handsome and had an extraordinary bearing. Li Ruhua bowed. "I'll have to trouble senior apprentice, Brother Ming." Mingzhe was one of the 10 strongest people in the world below the Emperor Realm. He was ranked 3rd. He had once fought with an Emperor Realm expert and was able to escape unscathed. It was rumored that he was still hiding his true strength and had the qualifications to contend for first place. Even Li Ruhua didn't dare show the slightest bit of disrespect in front of this seemingly gentle and calm young man. The so-called 10 strongest people below the Emperor Realm were only half a step away from leaping through the Dragon's Gate. In fact, due to their aptitude and foundation, their status was no less than that of a half-step emperor. Mingzhe's gaze fell on the person beside Li Ruhua. He hesitated for a moment and said slowly, "Junior apprentice, Sister Lee, every disciple of the 13th floor is qualified to bring a servant with them. They will be our best helpers on our path of cultivation in the future." His words were vague, but Li Ruhua understood his meaning. She bowed and said, "I understand Senior Brother Ming's good intentions, but he is indeed my best choice. Your honey is my arsenic. You may see him as a stubborn rock, but I see him as an unpolished jade." There were many similar situations in the world of cultivation. After all, everyone's fortunes and encounters were different. Ming cupped his hands. "I have been presumptuous. Please forgive me, junior sister." He smiled faintly and waved his sleeves. "Then let's go." The sea of clouds parted with a wave of his sleeve, revealing a flight of stairs leading to the heavens. Ming led the way, and Li Ruhua followed behind him. The one who she had insisted on choosing as her servant despite the objections of her family was Chan Shanglu of Guanhai City, whose family had been wiped out. He was currently submissive and didn't dare to reveal anything, but there was a trace of emotion in the depths of his eyes. "Father, can you see this in the heavens? Your son is currently walking on the stairway leading to the 13th floor." Mingja turned his head and glanced at Qin Shanglu, then at the calm Li Ruhua. He seemed to be deep in thought. Chapter 16:37. Magpies chirped in the branches. According to old Master Min, an honored guest was coming to visit. He ordered the steward to bring servants to carefully clean up the courtyard and sprinkle water on the roads. He changed into a new set of rich and noble robes and personally went to the pier to greet them. The steward nodded again and again. He led the servants into a busy state, but he couldn't help but mutter inwardly. Just where did this honored guest come from that the old master would care so much about him? Could it be that the old man from the young master's mother's side was angry that the old master had stolen away his precious grandson without even informing him? So he came to visit in a fit of rage? But the old master had clearly said that in order to prevent the old man from rushing about, he would first hide where he would be staying from the old man. Once everything was settled, he would take the initiative to apologize to old Taishan. The young master had also agreed to this matter. He personally wrote a letter to appease the old man's mood. He had personally delivered the letter, but the old master was worried and had secretly opened it to see if there were any problems. The steward shook his head and decided not to think too much about it. Just what sort of person was his old master? All he needed to do was listen to orders. On the pier, old Master Min stood facing the wind, a smile on his face as he faced the Great Lake. But right now, it was like he was chewing on a piece of top-quality gold thread. The taste could be imagined. He had lived for so many years, but even when he was forced out of his home by a group of old bastards, he had never felt so aggrieved. At the very least, those old bastards had lost several teeth. Moreover, he had already bowed his head in the imperial capital. If he continued to act so shamelessly, wouldn't he become nothing more than a puppet in the hands of that madam? This was going too far. Cough. Although he wasn't a human, his methods were still going too far. Old Master Min smiled and clenched his teeth. He had to make things clear today. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered. He had to let that madam know that he wasn't some softo. A ship sailed over from afar. Master Min, who was filled with hatred, hurriedly took 2 steps forward. A smile immediately blossomed on his aged face. The ship slowed down and slowly docked at the pier. Old Master Min waved his hand as he looked at the 3 people walking out. "Marquis, madam, I've been waiting here for a long time. I welcome the arrival of 2 honored guests." Qin had a calm expression, but he actually felt a bit strange in his heart. He hadn't interacted with this old man in the imperial capital, but right now he was clearly an ordinary person without the slightest bit of the aura of a cultivator leaking out from him. However, an ordinary person clearly did not have the qualifications to become the master of an island in the Thousand Islands County. It was even more impossible for Little Meaty to remember him. Therefore, the more ordinary he looked on the surface, the more extraordinary he was in reality. This old Master Min was definitely a powerful character. Seeing that little meaty had no intention of speaking, Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands across his chest. I took the liberty to come here and disturb your peace. I hope you don't blame me. Lord Min's smile grew brighter. Marquis, you're flattering me. It's our great honor that you and your wife can come to Changdao. He observed Ruru's expression and saw her frown. His heart shivered, and he immediately gestured with his hand. It's windy outside. We've already prepared some simple refreshments at home. I hope Marquis and Madam don't mind. Qin nodded. Thank you for your hospitality. The master and servant disembarked from the ship. A servant had already prepared a carriage for them. After boarding the carriage, the journey was smooth, and they soon arrived at the new residence. The scale was large, and the courtyard was imposing. After Qin Yu left the carriage, he couldn't help but take several glances at it. Lord Min said, "This is a remote courtyard in the countryside. Besides taking up a bit more space, there isn't anything exquisite about it. I've embarrassed myself in front of Marquis." Qin Yu smiled. Lord Min is too modest. This residence of yours is quite good, at the very least. At least, it is far better than my residence in the imperial capital. Sensing his aura, he could feel that the great heaven and earth net was extremely lax in restraining this residence in front of him. This was more like a form of tacit understanding and respect. The meaning behind it was clear. Old Master Min was wearing a common Lao Guai-style robe. It looked very rich and noble, but in reality, it was unfathomable. Marquis, you praise me too much. Old Man Min glanced over, feeling somewhat bewildered. How could a mere early-stage ruler be able to see through the depths of his courtyard? But thinking about it, if Marquis Zhongwu could be this madam's man, cough cough, even if it was only a name, how could he be an ordinary person? If he had this ability, then it was normal. Marquis, madam, please. After sweeping it clean, the residence seemed even more tranquil and beautiful. As they walked down the stone-paved path, they could see a brilliant and vibrant scene in the distance. Seeing Qin Yu look over, Lord Min smiled. These are flowing light tiles produced in our western desolate flowing light city. They're a bit expensive, but they do look beautiful. Marquis and Madam's residence is in that courtyard covered in flowing light tiles. At night, when the stars shine down, it is a completely different scene. As he spoke, he led the way. Lord Min was calm and collected, his words extremely humorous. From start to finish, little Meaty maintained an expressionless face. It was only that the corners of her lips would occasionally curve up in a heart-shaking sneer. Of course, the one who was frightened was Lord Min. Before this, he thought he had seen through the madam's problem, but now that he saw her, he didn't feel too sure. As to what choice to make, his heart was tangled. After all, he only had a single son. They entered the living room and sat down. There were already maids that had prepared refreshments. The tea wasn't ordinary. It must have been produced from a top immortal tea tree. Unexpectedly, the pastries were also very delicious. For Qin Yu, who had tasted the cooking of the root man, to give a very delicious evaluation was already commendable. Little Meaty suddenly said, "These pastries are quite good. They should be rewarded." Lord Min hesitated for a moment. He smiled. "Since Madam says they should be rewarded, then call the chef over to personally thank Madam. This can also be considered a blessing for him." He waved his hand, and naturally, the servants left in a hurry. Soon, the owner of the breakfast stall, who had left the imperial capital with him for some reason and became a part of his master's small kitchen, appeared in the living room. He looked like an honest man. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat, and he was still panting in his white apron. He constantly rubbed his hands, as if he was at a loss for what to do when he was suddenly called. "Alai, Marquis Zhongwu's wife likes your pastries. She called you over to receive her reward. Hurry up and kowtow." The old chef named Alai's face flushed red. He hurriedly knelt down and respectfully kowtowed. "Thank you, madam, for the reward." Baiji walked out and placed a stone in his hand. This stone was one of the fragments of the totem god stone from the stone god tribe. It was worth a small amount of money. The old chef's face turned even redder. He looked at his master as if he was holding a red-hot soldering iron. He didn't know whether to accept it or not. Lord Min pondered for a moment and smiled. Since it's Madam's reward for you, then accept it. Also kowtow to Madam. There's no need to kowtow. Little Meaty said lightly, her eyes bright. I like the pastries you make very much. Are you willing to leave with me? Don't worry, I will naturally give Lord Min a very generous ransom. I won't let him suffer a loss. As for whether you agree or not, she looked up and smiled. I think Lord Min won't refuse for a chef. For my sake. Lord Min smiled bitterly and said without hesitation, Madam, what are you talking about? It's this chef's blessing that you like him. I'll lie. From today onwards, you're no longer a chef in our house. You can go anywhere you want. The old chef's face paled. He waved his hands. Master, I've received a great favor from you, and I haven't repaid it. I won't go anywhere in this life. If you don't want me to be your chef, then I'll go back to my old profession. I'll borrow a piece of land on this island and set up a stall. He looked at Little Meaty and said carefully, Madam, it's indeed my blessing that you like my cooking. I didn't know how to appreciate your kindness. If you want to beat me or kill me, you could do as you please. Little Meaty lowered her head and looked at the chef kneeling in front of her. You really don't agree? Your master knows that I have a bad temper. Since you said you can do as you please, don't regret it when the time comes. Lord Min's expression changed. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. The old chef said firmly, I won't regret it. I'm willing to accept your punishment. Baiji's eyes flashed with a cold light. In her opinion, it was this old chef's great fortune to be valued by the madam. He actually dared to reject the madam. He deserved to die. Little Meaty glanced at her and waved her hand. If you don't want to, then forget it. Just pretend that we don't have the fortune to eat good food. Her words had a double meaning. Lord Min's forehead broke out in cold sweat. He felt more and more uncertain. I'm a little tired. Arrange for someone to bring us to rest. Little Meaty stood up and spoke. Her face was expressionless and her voice was cold. Chinyu didn't think that he had lost face because of this. After all, he knew that if it wasn't for Little Meaty, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to walk into this living room and sit down for a cup of tea. However, when it came to something like face, it was better to leave some. If it was too stiff, it wouldn't be a good thing. Then I'll have to trouble Lord Min. Lord Min's face was full of smiles. It's my duty. Servants, bring the Marquis and the Madam to rest. We will definitely serve them well. After the three of them left, Min Chongjing wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and sat back in his chair. He picked up his teacup and drank it in 2 mouthfuls. He glared at Old Chef, who was still kneeling on the ground. You've got guts. The old chef reached out a hand. Master, I'll have to trouble you to help me. My legs are soft, and I can't get up. Min Chongjing sneered. If you can't get up, then kneel. Right now, my legs are also soft. He really was a little afraid. Just now, the living room seemed calm and tranquil, but the truth was a turbulent undercurrent. Although the Marquise Madam was sitting motionless, the way she looked at the two of them was as if she was staring at a piece of fat meat in a bowl. It was as if in the next moment, a pair of chopsticks would reach out and grab the two's vital points. Then, she would send it into her mouth and chew on it. Soft and delicious. The living room quieted down. After a long time, the old chef crawled up, his face pale. Master, how did you provoke this madam? His words nearly caused Min Chongjing to jump up and curse. How did I provoke her grandmother? In all honesty, this was really like a pot falling from the sky when I was sitting at home. I've already abandoned my family and business and ran all the way from the imperial capital to this wilderness. But this madam still refuses to let go. What can I do? When he thought of the cause of this matter, it was because of that 9-tailed fox. Min Chongjing gritted his teeth in hatred. Damn it, I really have a natural conflict with the demon race. If he could do it all over again, he would never talk about the old relationship. He would slap that coquettish fox to death and get rid of all the evidence. As he scolded and kicked, the kitchen was filled with loud bangs. The girl with the long braid, who was guarding outside the door, nodded her head vigorously as she felt sorry for him. She thought to herself, Master, It's best if you use more force to prevent father from having that kind of idea again. The best would be to really break his legs so that he could lie on the bed. However, 2 would be enough. After she left, she was still thinking of finding a companion for her father so that he wouldn't have a miserable life in his old age. It wouldn't be good for him to become a widow. In the distance, a group of servants hid and peeked, listening to the movements in the kitchen. Then looking at the beautiful maid at the door, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva, their faces slightly pale. In their hearts, they thought that old chef's daughter was really pretty, but her heart was too cruel. She could even do such a thing to her own father. If it were them, what would happen to them? All right, they should stay far away from her in the future. Don't ever have any ideas that you shouldn't have. Otherwise, you might die one day. The kitchen finally quieted down. Min Zhongjing panted and pulled a chair to sit down. His face was still ashen. Say, do you understand? No. Old chef, who was curled up, raised his head pitifully, revealing his swollen face. I understand. Old master, please calm down. Did you hurt yourself? It's all my fault. I'm already so old, but my bones are still so hard. It's a big sin to hurt you, he said with a face full of shame. Old Masterman couldn't help but raise his head and sigh. He really wanted to rush out and give him another beating. You think you're awesome because your bones are strong? Why don't you look at the situation? What are you showing off for? He took a deep breath and exhaled. Min Zhongjing stared into his eyes. Listen to me on this matter. Before I say anything, you can't do anything. Otherwise, that precious daughter of yours can forget about being the legal wife of my son. At most, she'll be a concubine. You know the rules of our family. I don't need to explain the difference between a legal wife and a concubine, right? Old chef widened his eyes pitifully. Old master, please don't. We've already agreed on it. How can you change it just like that? He looked pleading and kept looking at the door. Old Masterman sneered. I'm the old master. I can change it if I want to. What can you do about it? He flicked his sleeves and walked away angrily. He thought to himself, if it weren't for the sensible little girl who quickly informed me, you would have ruined my plan. That madam, if you could really do anything, I would have let you die. But this matter, it's not that simple. The door closed and opened again. This time, it was the little girl who came in. A few years had passed, but she still had her black braids, and her figure was even more curvaceous. She looked at her father quietly with a faint look in her eyes. She said softly, I heard what old master said. If you spoil my marriage and turn me from a legal wife to a concubine, even if you're my biological father, you won't be able to talk to me. Old chef's face was full of grief and indignation. Stupid girl, don't you see how I look now? You're still standing there saying such heartless words. The little girl sneered. Father, I'll call you father again. But if you continue to play dumb, I'm not sure what you'll say next. Old chef looked up to the sky and sighed. Good. I won't mess around, all right? When a girl is of age, she can't be kept at home. She'll always side with outsiders. The ancients were right. The little girl blushed and walked over to pull old chef up. Father, I'm doing this for your own good. Old chef's eyes widened, but before he could react, he heard 2 crisp cracking sounds. His whole body fell to the ground with a thud. Both of his thighs had been kicked so cleanly that his bones and tendons had been broken. He pointed at his daughter with a trembling hand. His lips moved a few times, but he couldn't bear to scold her. The little girl knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. Father, I don't want you to die, and I don't want to spoil my marriage. I can only let you suffer a little. When that madam leaves, I'll listen to you. Old Master Min, who had already walked far away, suddenly twitched his mouth twice. He turned his head to look at the kitchen. He thought to himself, this lass has a good temperament. She can even kill her own father. Our future head of the household must have this kind of decisive temperament. This time, he could really rest assured. He turned around and walked a few more steps. Old Master Min couldn't help but rub his chin. He thought to himself, maybe I should restrain my gaze from now on. The little girl was all grown up. If she held a grudge or something, his old arms and legs might not be able to bear it. The effect of the flowing light tile was not just for show. In Changdao, The density of heaven and earth spiritual energy was at most average. But when he walked into the courtyard and took a deep breath, he felt a little damp. He felt like he was bathing in the spring rain. Of course, this was just a figure of speech. It meant that the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the courtyard was so thick that it almost condensed into raindrops. For cultivators, even if they were at the ruler realm, staying in this kind of environment for a long time would be greatly beneficial to their cultivation. Most importantly, the process of gathering spiritual energy was silent. It didn't have a shocking momentum of a spirit-gathering array. As the saying goes, the water is deep and the water is silent. The more subtle a method was, the more it showed off one's background. It was no wonder that the flowing light tile was so expensive and was still popular in the desolate region. Bang! With a heavy kick, Baiji was sent flying backwards. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face paled. Meaty's eyes were icy cold. You really are an idiot. Do you know who Min Chong-jing and the old chef are? It's true that they don't dare to touch me, but they aren't people that a lowly maid like you has the qualifications to threaten. Baiji struggled to get up and kneel. Madam, I just feel that. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by a slap. I don't want you to feel that. Moreover, who do you think you are? Do you think you have the qualifications to express yourself in front of me? Meaty sneered. Believe it or not, if I leave here, you won't live past tonight. You will be cooked and served on the table. If you don't even have this little bit of eyesight, what use do you have for these eyes? You might as well dig them out and step on them twice to hear the sound. Baiji shivered. She could clearly feel the madam's anger. She clenched her teeth and took a deep breath. Then, she lifted her hand to dig out the eyeball. Bang! Another kick sent her flying out the door. You brainless fool, I want to hear the sound. Do you think I don't know how to do it myself? Do I need you to dig it out yourself? Scram back to your room. For the next few days, without my orders, you're not allowed to take a single step out. Otherwise, I will really leave you here and let you experience what it means to be in purgatory on earth. Yes. Baiji respectfully bowed and limped away. Meaty's face was dark and gloomy. Her mood was as bad as ever. Baiji's stupidity wasn't the main reason. It was because she had run into the muzzle of the spear that she had become today's punching bag. Min Chong-jing, humph humph, you old thing, you actually dared to bare your teeth at me, and you even brought along such a helper. Humph 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 humph. Do you really think that my teeth have all fallen off and I can't bite you two bastards? If it weren't for her being by Qin Yu's side, then according to Meaty's temperament, she would have flipped out on the spot. In the imperial capital, that idiot in the Thunder Pond, and now Min Chong-jing and the old chef had caused Meaty to feel the disparity between them. It could be imagined how bad her mood was. If this were in the past, she would have had 100 times more courage. She gloomily thought for a moment. Then, she looked up and saw Baiji spitting out a mouthful of blood on the ground. She coldly sneered, What? Do you want to try and see how much my power has declined? Fine, I will eat up that stupid woman today. Let's see what you can do about it. From the blood stain on the ground, light surged and a faint figure appeared. He bowed and said, Meng Shan greets you. After a brief pause, he fell to his knees and bowed in the proper manner of the barbarians. Meng Shan came here today to thank you. You didn't hesitate to consume your own source energy to save the sovereign of my barbarian race. The barbarians will forever remember this kindness and will never forget it in the slightest. Meaty had no expression. Speak less nonsense. I didn't save him because I wanted to owe you barbarians a favor. If you have anything concrete, then hurry up and take it out. Chapter 1639. Today, the great shaman of Meng Mountain had borrowed Baiji's blood to descend here. He didn't know whether it was because of his honest nature or because he sensed that little Meaty was in a bad mood, but he didn't hesitate. He reached into his chest and pulled out a beating heart. Of course, this heart wasn't his. In this world, there was no strange existence that would kill themselves to thank others. But it was also the heart of a great shaman. Only like this could it still keep beating and contain such a formidable strength after being taken out for so many years. This heart came from a great shaman of my barbarian race who died on the sea. If necessary, you can swallow it and burn this great shaman's heart. It should be enough for you to restore your peak strength in a short period of time without needing to worry that it will cause you too much damage. The great shaman of Mang Mountain respectfully said, "Compared to your great kindness, the reward of my barbarian race today is insignificant. Please don't be angry." Little Meaty reached out, and the great shaman's heart fell into her hand. Her eyes brightened, and she subconsciously licked her lips. She turned her hand away and said, "Don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. Aren't you just worried that something will happen to your barbarian sovereign? You gave me this great shaman's heart so that I can better protect your barbarian sovereign." The great shaman of Meng Mountain bowed. "Your eyes are like torches. My humble thoughts cannot be hidden from you." He took a deep breath. "I will have to trouble you with my barbarian sovereign." Little Meaty coldly sneered. "There is no need to flatter me. I accepted it because I wanted to, and it has nothing to do with you." He paused for a moment and said, "Since you've come, why don't you meet me?" The great shaman of Meng Mountain was a bit tempted. He hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "It's better not to meet me. Otherwise, I might draw out my aura and cause trouble for His Majesty." "You're quite thoughtful." Little Meaty looked at him. "Is there anything else?" The great shaman of Meng Mountain said, "Yes. The first matter is about His Majesty's incense flame Great Tao. Since Your Majesty has already stepped onto it, I can secretly make arrangements to collect incense for Your Majesty. This will be of some help to Your Majesty's cultivation." Little Meaty shook her head. "No, at least not now. He cannot be tainted by the power of the Goliath Joss flames. Otherwise his identity will be exposed." She looked at him with a deep gaze. "You underestimate that building in Middle Wasteland. Even if it's just an empty frame, don't forget that there's a white jade capital above it. The Berserker's kismet has always been dissipating. They might not be able to sense it for a while, but if the incense sticks show any abnormal movements, they will definitely be locked onto." The Grand Shaman of Meng Mountains felt his heart tremble. He took a deep breath and cupped his fists. "You are right. I was too careless. I'll temporarily collect the joss sticks of my clan, and I'll give them to His Majesty when the time is right. The second matter is that there was a great shaman who committed a great crime in the early years of the barbarian tribe and was identified as a rebel. After the trial, his identity was taken away by the shaman ancestral court, and his whereabouts are unknown." When he said this, a bitter smile appeared on the great shaman of Meng Mountain's face. But now, reality has proven that he was not wrong. Instead, it was those seniors of the shaman tribe who committed a grave mistake. Not long ago, this great shaman who lost his identity suddenly sent me a message saying that he wanted to return to the shaman ancestral court and take back his identity that was taken away from him. Little Meaty's lips curled up in a mocking smile. Those old fellows of the shaman ancestral court aren't willing to lower their heads and admit their mistakes. That's right. Those people are old and smelly to begin with, and their mouths are very tight. Making them lower their heads is even more uncomfortable than killing them. The great shaman of Meng Mountain's heart chilled. He discovered that this mysterious person in front of him had a very deep understanding of the barbarian tribe. The meaning behind her seemingly ordinary words was enough to make one think deeply. Little Meaty glanced at him, and the smile on her lips became even wider. "Many years ago, I ate a great shaman of the barbarian tribe. He made a deal with me, but after that, he went back on his word. How could there be such a thing in this world? So, I do know quite a bit about the barbarian tribe." The great shaman of Meng Mountain's expression changed. He believed that Little Meaty was not lying. His thoughts raced, and he soon found the ancient records of the barbarian tribe. It was about a certain great shaman who had suddenly died without any warning. The so-called sudden death was just a story told to the outside world. The truth was that the great shaman had suddenly disappeared, and he was in his own secret training room. After he disappeared, the barbarian tribe investigated and collected evidence. They found some faint traces in the great shaman's personal notes. It seemed that many years ago, This great shaman had once made a deal with an extremely ancient and mysterious existence in this world in order to make a breakthrough. This matter involved the dignity of a great shaman of the barbarian tribe. In fact, it was highly likely that it would cause some sort of instability within the barbarian tribe. After all, the realm of the great shaman was far beyond their reach. If they made a deal with some existence, they might be able to make a breakthrough. Even if they knew that there would be endless troubles in the future, there would still be many barbarians who were stuck where they were unable to make a breakthrough and would be willing to take the risk. This matter had been sealed as a top secret, and it had never been unsealed until now. Only the great shaman of the barbarian tribe had the qualifications to read its contents, and they also needed to swear an oath with the barbarian tribe's bloodline that they would never attempt to make a deal with this mysterious existence. Little Meaty picked up her teacup and casually drank 2 mouthfuls. She ignored the great shaman of Mang Mountain, whose face was filled with uncertainty. Her eyes were calm. Who? The great shaman of Mang Mountain let out a long breath. He bowed and said, since it was a violation of the deal, it is only right that he pay the price. He hesitated for a moment and then bitterly smiled. But regarding this matter, I ask that you do not tell the other barbarians, lest something unexpected happen. Little Meaty's eyebrows arched up. His bloodline still has descendants? The great shaman of Mang Mountain took a deep breath and said in a low voice, right now, the great shaman who controls the barbarian ancestral cord is a direct descendant of his bloodline. He has been secretly investigating the mysterious disappearance of the great shaman. Little Meaty licked her lips. Is that so? Then that is a pleasant surprise. She waved her hand. Go back and tell that unlucky fellow that I have agreed to help him make a trip to the ancestral court in the future. The great shaman of Mang Mountain forced a smile. My lady, I'm a bit regretful that I told you about this matter. Little Meaty had no expression. It's too late. She vaguely remembered that they had signed a bloodline contract in the past. In other words, the descendants of his bloodline were all her slaves? This was like a radish that had suddenly sprouted from her own vegetable field. What a pleasant surprise. The great shaman of Mang Mountain's forced smile deepened. As he looked at Little Meaty's face, he thought that His Majesty the barbarian sovereign wouldn't just stand idly by and watch as this person acted recklessly, right? After all, this was the barbarian ancestral court. If something were to happen, it would surely cause a great uproar. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. My lady, Mang Mountain bids farewell. Little Meaty arched an eyebrow. You're leaving just like that? Why don't you think about it carefully? Is there anything else you haven't said? The great shaman of Mang Mountain shook his head. Baiji is now your maid. Whether she lives or dies will depend on your will. I will not interfere. Shwa, his figure vanished from sight. Little Meaty looked at the place where the great shaman of Mang Mountain had disappeared and rubbed her temples. This was a person who knew when to advance and when to retreat, and knew how to act appropriately. If he dared to make a request, just because he gave her the heart of a great shaman and flattered her a few words, she would definitely agree. But as for how she would do it, that would depend on her mood. This woman Baiji was a bit stupid, but her life wasn't bad. Then, she would stay here for a bit longer. Little Meaty looked up at the void in front of her and sneered. Old Master Min wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. He stood up and cupped his hands in apology. When he sat down, he looked aggrieved. This is my home. How could you come and go as you please? Have you ever considered the feelings of your master? But the one who came just now was really strong. Well, of course, he was still weaker than me. But if he fought with Old Chef, he would probably have a 50-50 chance of winning. Was it that madam who deliberately found a helper to put pressure on them? No, if that was the case, he shouldn't have come and gone in a hurry. He should have stayed for at least a few days, waiting for the dust to settle. Old Masterman scratched his head and took a sip of tea. As the cold tea entered his stomach, he felt even more irritated. He always felt that this madam's actions were too strange, and he couldn't figure out her depth. For example, Gosheng, the third-generation disciple of the Leaf family who thought he was a dog. She was the one who sent him here, but after he arrived, she didn't care. Did she not care at all? Or did she think that old mastermen would not dare to act recklessly? No matter how angry she was, she had to pinch her nose and accept it, no matter how he thought about it. He felt that the latter was more likely. This made old masterman's mood even worse. Chinyu was cultivating. After returning to his residence, he could feel the rich heaven and earth spiritual energy that had condensed into water droplets. His eyes brightened, and he didn't want to waste any time. As for other matters, he didn't know why he had to come to this mysterious and unfathomable residence. Just leave it to little Meaty. 30 years passed in the blink of an eye, and he had to work hard every day. The only exception was when the great shaman of Meng Mountain arrived. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred, and he faintly sensed something. He confirmed that the source of that feeling came from little Meaty's residence. After thinking about it, he pretended that he hadn't discovered anything. He now believed in little Meaty, and since he believed in her, there was no need for him to doubt her. So, since little Meaty didn't say anything, that meant that he didn't need to appear. He continued to cultivate. Drifting Fire Tribe. Many days had passed since the death of the barbarian sovereign, but life was still going on as usual. There was no change. The fear in everyone's hearts dissipated a little. They thought that even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. Drifting Fire Tribe gradually regained its stability. As a matter of fact, after successfully selling that high-quality stone, the Chu Heavenly Clan's clan chief was so happy that he married another woman to him. Today, they were holding a wedding. The old barbarian hadn't been in a good mood recently, so he didn't want to participate. He listlessly leaned against a stone, wearing a tattered robe. His back was hunched, and he looked drowsy. As he heard several boys angrily discussing this matter, he opened his eyes and waved them away. Go do what you need to do. What are you all talking about? If you aren't convinced, then go find the tribe leader and scold him. I'll give him a thumbs up. The several young barbarians immediately withered. One of the boys bitterly smiled and said, "Uncle, please don't mock us. How can we possibly provoke the tribe leader?" He clenched his teeth and pointed a finger. We are the ones who aren't convinced. Who in the tribe doesn't know that Aya and him are on good terms? Aya's parents said that they were willing to give Amu 5 years. As long as they could take out a betrothal gift, they would marry the girl to him. But the tribe leader wanted to marry a concubine, and he insisted on choosing Aya. Her parents didn't dare to resist, but Amu went to cause trouble and was beaten by the tribe leader's guards. Bah! What bullshit guards? He is the brother-in-law of the tribe leader's wife. He is helping his brother-in-law find a concubine. He is a scoundrel with ulcers on his head and pus on the soles of his feet. In the past, he pestered Aya and was taught a lesson by us. I think this matter was most likely instigated by this scoundrel. Everyone was filled with anger. The boy named Amu had a swollen face and a bloody nose. He stared at the ground without speaking. The old barbarian frowned. His eyes fell on Amu. Do you think this is true? Amu looked up, his eyes red. Uncle, Aya will be brought back to the tent by the tribe leader tonight. I want to go save her. As he finished speaking, he fell to his knees. If I go, I won't be able to return. My parents are still in the tribe, and I want to ask you to take care of them. The reason why these young barbarians liked to surround the old barbarian was because his luck was good, and he could always make a small fortune. That stone from last year was proof. Secondly, the old barbarian really knew a lot, and they could gain a lot of knowledge by following him. Thirdly, he had a special status in the tribe. It was said that the old barbarian was not a member of the tribe. Back then, he had fainted in the wilderness. When he was picked up, he looked like this. Even now, the tribe leader treated him with respect. The old barbarian frowned. Is it worth it? Amu nodded. I promised Aya that I would marry her, so I won't let her suffer. Otherwise, I will live the rest of my life sullenly. I might as well die like this. The old barbarian muttered. As long as you don't live sullenly, you aren't afraid of death. Amu clenched his teeth. I'm not afraid. Then go. The old barbarian thought for a moment and took out a knife from his chest. He usually used this knife to cut meat and eat. It was sloppy and had a layer of grease on it. For you, use it tonight. Amu took it with both hands and kowtowed. At night, the wedding turned into a funeral. The tribe leader was beheaded by Amu. Two elders close to the tribe leader attacked in anger and became ghosts under the knife. Then, everyone became quiet. They stared at the knife in Amu's hand with wide eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. Even Amu himself, the totem fire spirit of the flowing fire tribe, appeared and directly announced to the tribe that Amu had become the new tribe leader of the flowing fire tribe. And tonight was the tribe leader's wedding. Amu, who had become the tribe leader without even knowing it, brought his new wife Aya to find the old barbarian on the second day. They didn't know when he had left. This made the group of young barbarians look at each other in dismay. Their eyes gradually showed respect. Amu pulled Aya to kneel on the ground and respectfully kowtowed towards the old barbarian's tent. And now, thousands of miles away, the old barbarian was silently hurrying on his way. Even a junior knew that it was better to die a glorious death than to live sullenly. Yet, he couldn't see through it all these years. It was really laughable. He didn't know what was right or wrong before, but now that he was in the right, how could he continue sullenly? There was no such logic in the world. Today, he had to go to the ancestral court and take back his identity. He had to let them announce to the entire barbarian world who was in the wrong in the past. The old barbarian knew that this matter was very difficult and might even be dangerous. But he wasn't afraid. This world was still reasonable, and his fists were almost fully grown. Chapter 1640. Little Meaty suddenly changed her mind. Of course, before she changed her mind, she first looked around to make sure that Chinyu was indeed in seclusion. Baiji was released and allowed to walk through the residence. Not just that, but she also took off her white robes and changed into a dress that accentuated her curves. When Old Man Min inadvertently saw Baiji on the cruise ship and Min Xiangtai talking and laughing with him, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning and nearly lost his composure. He turned to look for Little Meaty and nearly fell to his knees. He sullenly said, "Madam, I will definitely help cure that subordinate of yours. But this matter is very troublesome, so you must give me some time. I only have a single son, and I can't afford to be tossed around like this. I ask that Madam show mercy and call back that young miss at your side." Little Meaty took a deep breath and then gently laid down the teacup, not revealing the slightest bit of anger. If Old Man Min feels this is inappropriate, then you can personally kill that girl. There's no need to make a trip here. Old Man Min rubbed his face. He really did want to do this, but unfortunately, he didn't dare. Of course, he denied it again and again, wishing that he could swear on the spot that he wouldn't dare to show the least bit of disrespect to Madam. Little Meaty didn't believe a single word of these words, but they had already exchanged some words and had vaguely expressed their attitude. Now they could begin their proper business. She tapped the table and lightly said, "It's just a dog. It isn't worth my trouble. So what if it dies?" Min Changjing's lips twitched. He took a deep breath and said, "May I ask, Madam, is there something else? If this old man can do it, I will absolutely not decline." Little Meaty lifted a hand and pointed to where Qin Yu was in seclusion. Marquis Zhongwu obtained a lucky chance a few days ago and was able to see the gate of heaven and man ahead of time. But just because he can see it doesn't mean he can touch it. We need to open a path for him. Min Changjing furrowed his eyebrows. He fell silent. The air was quiet and peaceful. Little Meaty's lips curved up. "How is it? Old Man Min has endured for so long, and now you don't plan on hiding anymore?" She licked her lips, her eyes bright. Min Changjing forced a smile. "Madam, you speak too seriously. Even if this old man ate the courage of a leopard, I wouldn't dare to harbor any ill intentions towards you. It is just that this matter is extremely thorny. That's right, this old man admits that I can indeed do this. However, building a ladder for the great Tao of others will damage one's own cultivation. There is no such logic in this world." He looked up and looked at her. His tone was still respectful, but there was something different in his eyes. "I don't think Madam wants to tell the horse to run, but doesn't want to give it a single blade of grass, right?" The bottom line was something that could be said lightly, as if it could be said directly with just a touch of his lips. But in fact, it was very heavy. It was fine if he couldn't touch the bottom line, but if he really crossed it, he would have to change his face and attitude, regardless of whether he was willing or not. Now, Min Changjing had placed his bottom line in front of this madam. Whether she would take a step forward or take half a step back depended on her choice. Little Meaty's face was expressionless, and her eyes were cold. "Lord Min, how bold of you." Min Changjing shook his head. "There's nothing I can do. After living for so many years, I can't become a marionette when I'm old. Otherwise, I'll be ashamed of my cultivation." Little Meaty sneered. She flipped her palm, and a beating heart appeared. Across from her, Min Changjing frowned. His face was slightly pale, but there was no cowardice in the depths of his eyes. Humph! It seemed like old Master Min was afraid after all. But it's a pity to waste this heart in this place. So, let's make a deal. Min Changjing hurriedly nodded, his face full of smiles. Good deal, good deal. Peace brings wealth. The corners of Little Meaty's mouth curved up. So, you'd better think carefully before you make your offer. Otherwise, I might change my mind. Min Changjing cupped his hands respectfully. Don't worry, madam. This old man doesn't want to die yet. Even though he said that, they still had to engage in a battle of words. Little Meaty almost turned hostile several times before they reluctantly reached an agreement. With a bitter face, Min Changjing left the courtyard covered with flowing tiles. Suddenly, he let out a long breath, a thoughtful look on his face. At some point, old Chef, whose legs had been broken, appeared beside him. He looked as if he was all ears. That's it for now. Since this madam didn't go too far, we'll just endure it. There's no need to make a life and death decision. Old Chef nodded. Master, you're right. These are wise and prudent words. Min Changjing gritted his teeth. Get lost. I'm in a bad mood now. Don't be an eyesore. Although the worst situation had not happened, he had still suffered a great loss. Moreover, he was in his own home. Being suppressed by an outsider, of course he wouldn't be happy. Old Chef turned and walked away without any hesitation. Only when Old Chef was angry would it mean that he was fine. If he looked calm on the surface, that would mean that something big was about to happen. Come back. Weren't your legs broken? If you go back like this, the little girl will lose face. Min Changjing had a dangerous look in his eyes. Old Chef instantly disappeared without a trace. Master, you don't have to worry about me. I naturally have a way to hide it from that little girl. As he ran, he looked a little wronged. He thought that he was really not a person who was good at hiding his inner emotions. Old Chef could see through his thoughts with one look. Just now, he really wanted to personally break his legs. They would really be broken. Alas, he didn't have many years to live. Why didn't Old Chef let him repay his kindness? He couldn't bring his skills with him after he died. It would be a pity to waste them like this. He might as well take a gamble. Although that madam was holding the heart of a great, which, if he directly abandoned his body, he might be able to seal her as well. He didn't need too much. As long as he could seal her for a while, it would be enough for Old Chef to take action and swallow her. When she fell into Old Chef's stomach, no matter how powerful she was, would she be able to escape? Then, at most, it would be a painstaking effort. At most, she would have an upset stomach for a few hundred years. Little by little, she would be digested. Perhaps it would be a great opportunity. He really couldn't figure it out. Old Chef was very distressed, but he was very clear about Old Chef's intention. Since he didn't agree to take action, he could only continue to endure. Qin Yu's seclusion was interrupted by Little Meaty. She bluntly told Qin Yu that she had made a deal with Min Changjing. He would help Qin Yu build a path to enter. It was because he knew which door Little Meaty was referring to that Qin Yu was even more startled. He quickly looked her up and down. After making sure there wasn't anything wrong with her, he was still a bit worried. Little Meaty rolled her eyes. Don't worry, I didn't suffer a loss. At most, I paid a few things that didn't cost me anything. She paused for a moment, and then her lips curved up in a smile. As for that old toad, he's going to vomit blood this time. Don't be polite and eat as much as you can. Qin Yu glanced at Little Meaty, hesitating to speak. Enough. A man shouldn't be so straightforward. I just came to tell you something. Just wait. Little Meaty turned and walked away, a warm look in her eyes. Min Changjing was waiting outside the courtyard. As he saw Little Meaty come out, he bitterly smiled. When a madam is speaking, she always avoids me a bit. This old man has been listening outside. It's really a strange feeling. Little Meaty glanced at him. She lightly said, "You must keep your word. I will personally go and bring Baiji back. I can also chat with this young sir of yours while I'm at it." Min Changjing's complexion stiffened. He watched her leave and gnashed his teeth in hatred. But he could only squeeze out a smile and push open the door to the courtyard. "Marquis, did the madam explain things clearly to you? If there isn't anything else, how about we begin now?" Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands together. "It's no trouble at all. To be able to cooperate with the madam is this old man's good fortune." Min Changjing coughed and lowered his voice, a bitter expression on his face. "It's just that this cooperation is far too much of a loss. To build a path for Marquis, what this old man painstakingly cultivated day and night is my cultivation. So, I ask that Marquis be magnanimous and don't allow this old man's foundation to be damaged." Qin Yu nodded. "Lord Min, rest assured. You have helped me so much. So how could Ning Qin not be grateful? I know what I'm doing." Who was Ning Qin? In any case, I wasn't. Min Changjing's face was filled with gratitude. He sighed with emotion and thanked Qin Yu again. Then, he gestured with his hand. "Marquis, I ask that you sit down cross-legged and focus your attention on that door. Afterwards, this old man will help you build a path to enter. You only need to maintain this entire process and immediately lock onto that door. There is no need to worry about anything else." Qin Yu cupped his hands together in thanks once more. Then he sat down cross-legged and focused his mind. Suddenly, that shining golden door appeared in front of him. Min Changjing walked in front of Qin Yu. He lifted a finger and placed it between his eyebrows. After sensing it, his complexion changed and he revealed a bitter expression. It seemed that this Marquis's cultivation talent wasn't too great. This door was high and high, nearly reaching the edge of the heavens. If no one opened a path for him, then even if he obtained a heaven-defying lucky chance or good fortune and saw this door ahead of time, he feared he would never have the chance to step through it in his life. Bitter. The higher the door, the longer the road, the more cultivation he would have to consume. He originally thought that this wasn't too much of a loss for him, but looking at it now, it seemed that he had suffered a great loss. Min Changjing hesitated for a moment, but that was all. The transaction had already been completed. If he went back on his word now, he wouldn't have the slightest bit of reason. Once that madam flipped out, she wouldn't have any scruples at all. At that time, he might not be able to protect his son, and he might not be able to escape unscathed. After all, he had personally seen that great shaman's heart that came from who knew where. There was a great deal of strength contained within. There was no way he could lie about it. Min Changjing clenched his teeth. Suddenly, golden veins appeared on his palm, like the roots of a great tree that sank into the ground. They gathered at his fingertip. Then his fingertip turned to dazzling gold. Faint traces of golden aura poured into the point between Qin Yu's eyebrows. To cultivate the road of the Great Tao, what one consumed was the power of the Great Tao. Every trace of this golden aura was Min Changjing's cultivation. Not to mention anything else, but as long as there was a monster in the world, if one could obtain even a trace of it, that would be a great stroke of good fortune. Even ordinary beasts, if they could swallow it into their stomachs and their bellies didn't burst open, they would be able to develop their spiritual wisdom and naturally understand the cultivation of the monster race. This was truly a supreme treasure in the eyes of monsters. The Thousand Islands County was originally a large lake, and this lake was tens of thousands of miles wide. The waters were deep, and there were countless monsters living in the water. Normally, due to fear of the rule of the Western Wasteland Empire, these monsters didn't dare to act recklessly. They lived in harmony with these islands and cultivated underwater. But today, each and every one of them seemed to have lost their minds. They displayed the ability to overturn rivers and seas as they rushed over from all directions. Within the Thousand Islands County, countless island masters of all sizes widened their eyes in horror. Then, they discovered that the goal of these crazed monsters in the water wasn't them at all. Rather, they rode the waves and soared toward some place. Looking at that place, it seemed that it was Changdao, which had suddenly gained a master several years ago. For a time, countless eyes gathered on it. All of them had different thoughts, but they gradually revealed a bit of heat. As the saying goes, there is no wind in a cave. There must be a reason for the unusual movements. It must be a great opportunity that could make the thousands of monsters in the lake suddenly go crazy. Could it be that a treasure was going to appear in Changdao? Outside the crowd of monsters, there were some figures hiding in the stormy waves, quietly moving towards Changdao. Ahem! After all, we are all neighbors connected by the same river. As the saying goes, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. Now that our neighbor is besieged by thousands of monsters, how can we, the good neighbors of the Western Wasteland, just sit back and watch? That's right. Chapter 1641. Old Chef's figure quietly appeared at the pier of Changdao. He took a look at the surging lake and sighed, thinking that this was really a case of not taking the road to heaven, but going to hell when there was no door. But in this world, whether it was a human or a demon, they all had to pay for their own choices. This was the so-called everything has its own destiny. Besides, he didn't have much time left, and he might not even have a chance in his next life. Why should he worry about getting involved in this? Besides, he didn't make the first move. At most, he was just trying to protect himself. Old Master Heavenly Axiom saw it clearly, so he couldn't put all the blame on him. Old Chef turned his hand and took out a golden talisman. The lines on it were messy, not beautiful at all, like a child's doodle. But the moment the talisman appeared, in the deep lake around Changdao, those anxious water demons who wanted to rush up and start a massacre suddenly felt terrified. The raging waves calmed down for a moment, and then the big demons in the deep lake turned around and ran out desperately. The burning greed in their instincts couldn't fight against the fear in their hearts. They only felt that Changdao in front of them was an open mouth, waiting for them to take the initiative to come to it. However, it was too late to escape now. The golden talisman in Old Chef's hand burned to ashes in an instant. Those messy lines that looked like graffiti became golden, as if they had come to life. They whizzed into the lake. They moved faster than lightning. In the blink of an eye, the water within 100 miles around Changdao turned into a cage. All water-kind spirit creatures who broke into the golden cage were locked inside. No matter how hard they tried to break the cage, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't shake the golden cage, not even a little bit. Even further away, ferocious waves were still crashing towards them. Hidden beneath each wave was a water monster from the lake. The water within 100 miles had turned into a cage, but they didn't seem to notice it and just ran into it. Seeing this, the good neighbors of the islands, who were hiding in the dark, all widened their eyes in horror. The demon-trapping formation in Changdao could not only hide, but also allowed people to enter but not get out. It seemed like it was going to swallow all the water demons in the lake, which was really shocking. Such extravagance, and might caused even some people that felt they were experienced and knowledgeable to be extremely astounded in their hearts, and their eyes instantly revealed reverence. Of course, he wanted to continue approaching, but he didn't dare to do so. However, he was also unwilling to turn around and leave just like that, because the movement and the preparation in Changdao were premeditated no matter how he looked at it. It cost a lot and involved a lot of things. The Thousand Islands County was also known as the River of Islands. It had a circumference of several tens of thousands of miles. The water in the lake was strong and pure. It bred tens of thousands of monsters, definitely more than the number of islands. It seemed that the commotion today was not limited to a radius of 3,000 or 5,000 miles. Perhaps more than half of the Thousand Islands County had been alarmed. A demon-trapping formation, no matter how high its grade or how powerful it was, could it really trap tens of thousands of demons? Just like those big eaters. They might be fine for a while, but after eating and drinking for a day and a half, their stomach will burst. At that time, wouldn't there be a chance? Of course, it's not too much for us to stay here and not get close to Changdao. As a good neighbor, we can watch from afar and wait for help. After all, it's our duty to help each other as good neighbors. In Min Xiangtai's yard, the young master who had fallen in love only had Baiji in his eyes. He didn't care about what was happening outside of Changdao. He had no idea what was happening outside of Changdao. Little Meaty sat on the ridge of the roof. The highest grade of Flowing Light City's flowing light tiles had fallen below her buttocks. Right now, it had also become dim and lusterless. The wisps of spiritual chi that had gathered here had been completely devoured. At this moment, she glanced at the direction of the dock, raised her eyebrows, and showed a cold smile. This old chef was giving her a warning, and he was a loyal protector of his master. However, this demon-subduing method was really powerful. If she risked her life, it would be a bit troublesome. Otherwise, after Little Meaty left Changdao, she wouldn't mind sneaking back one day and swallowing this old bastard, which would make up for her loss. She raised her hand and took a sip of the wine fruit. Little Meaty sprayed out a bit of the smell of wine. She said blandly, "Get out." Min Xiangtai, who was in the room, didn't notice her at all. Baiji's body stiffened, and then she smiled like a flower. By the time the word left the island and came to a stop in the air above the 50-kilometer demon-trapping formation, it was like a thunderclap rumbling in the ears of the neighbors, causing their faces to turn ashen and their bodies to totter on the verge of collapse. What bulsh asterisk T schemes? What bulsh asterisk T neighbors helping each other? They'd better run away and save their lives first. Changdao couldn't afford to mess with them. Not to mention the demon-trapping formation. There was a Grandmaster on the island? As for how powerful the Grandmaster was, they didn't know. But one thing was for sure. If he wanted to kill them, he just needed to move his mouth a few times. After shouting away the shadows outside the island, with the old chef's help, the water demons in the lake wouldn't be able to do anything. No matter how many came, they would all die. Little Meaty took another sip, and her eyes fell on the place where Qin Yu was cultivating in seclusion. It had begun. She curled up the corner of her mouth and gloated. She pushed the door of Qin Yu a little far away, and the old toad was going to suffer a big loss this time. Min Changjing gritted his teeth. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip water. Opening a path to heaven was difficult, not to mention that it would consume one's own cultivation. Helping an outsider open a path was even more difficult. In this world, even his own father wouldn't do such a thing. But now his only son was in front of that madam, and he didn't even know that he was outside the gates of hell. If he made a mistake, he would immediately die on the spot. No matter how angry he was, he could only endure it. After all, he only had one child in his family, the only one who could inherit his bloodline. But even so, he felt as if a hole had been dug in his hard-earned cultivation, and it was crazily leaking out. Min Changjing felt so uncomfortable that his heart was bleeding. Looking back, this was the first time he had suffered such a great loss in the tens of thousands of years of his life. But now, Qin Yu's entire mind was focused on one point, and he had completely cut off his perception of the outside world. Of course, he didn't know that Min Changjing was gritting his teeth in anger. He saw a golden path extending from beneath his feet, all the way up to the golden door in the sky. This was a mysterious and wondrous feeling. Qin Yu could clearly feel that as the great Tao beneath his feet spread upwards, his connection with the world became increasingly close. It was as if he were one with the heavens and earth, becoming an incarnation of it. Simply put, he had turned himself into a part of the heaven and earth net, and used this to counteract the suppression of the heaven and earth net. In a daze, Qin Yu came to some understanding. No wonder those who had reached the peak of the Emperor realm were still able to live free and unfettered lives. They weren't crushed by the heaven and earth net until they bled from their noses and mouths. This must be the reason. Just as Qin Yu was immersed in this, far away in the heaven-pulling sect, Qin Yu, who was cultivating in seclusion, felt his heart throbbing. His eyes widened in shock and astonishment. Then he smiled bitterly. Between the two of us, who was born of heaven and earth, such a thing could actually happen. As expected, there was a reason why the master was the master. After thinking for a while, the white-robed Chinyu smiled. He closed his eyes, and with a thought, his aura instantly disappeared. All that was left was a body that had lost all of its essence, chi, and spirit. Since that madam wants me to help, then I'll help her. The path to heaven is known as the 9 bends. Only when the bends lead to seclusion can one enjoy the blessings of heaven and earth and walk a true path to heaven. But since it's called the 9 bends, it's naturally winding, and one has to walk a lot more than others. In this world, there aren't many people who can really walk it. If Master can walk the 9 bends and open up the path to heaven, his future cultivation will naturally be unimpeded, and his achievements will be shocking. I'm wholeheartedly thinking for Master, without the slightest bit of selfishness. But if the person who helps Master open up the path to heaven isn't strong enough, or if he goes back on his words halfway and causes the path to heaven to become a dead end, then it's Master's own bad luck. It has nothing to do with me. Long Island, on the ridge of Min Xiangtai's house. A meaty eyebrow arched up and a mocking smile appeared on his lips. Little thing, you want to play mind games with me? You're far too naive. If it weren't for the sake of opening up a true path to heaven for Chinyu, would I have been dawdling here until now? She lifted a hand and pointed. Min Xiangtai, who had been speaking eloquently with a happy smile on his face, suddenly slumped down on the table and fell into a deep sleep. Across from him, Baiji, who had been smiling like a flower a moment ago, immediately restrained her expression. She stood up and respectfully bowed. Madam, Baiji appeared across from her, her expression light. You've done well. You've made up for a bit of your previous foolishness. She lifted a hand, and Min Xiangtai fell into it. Little Meaty turned her head and looked into the courtyard. There was a room with a tightly shut door. Little girl, I know you're hiding inside, but you'd better not move around. Otherwise, if my hand shakes, he really will die. At that time, you will be a pitiful little widow. With a creaking sound, the door was pushed open. A maid with a large whip in her hair walked out with a helpless expression. She respectfully bowed. Madam, please show mercy. Don't hurt the young master. I really don't want to be a widow. Little Meaty looked her up and down. Suddenly, her lips curved up. Almost made a mistake. Your Long Island is really interesting. The maid smiled. Madam, please keep this a secret. I haven't married yet. Little Meaty nodded. Of course. I also don't like that old toad. He actually dared to bargain with me. She picked up the unconscious Min Xiangtai and turned to leave. Her figure flickered, and she vanished from sight. The maid stood up and wiped the cold sweat from her forehead. As she looked at the place where the madam had left, her face paled. She finally understood why the old master and her father had joined hands and still hadn't dared to act rashly. This madam was too terrifying. Chapter 1642. The big girl let out a breath and looked up at Baiji. She suddenly said, I finally know why Madam called you stupid. It's because you really are stupid. I advise you not to move. I'm afraid that if I can't hold back and kill you, I'll get into trouble. Baiji smiled. When you were hiding in the room and saw me and Min Xiangtai whispering to each other, didn't you feel uncomfortable? The big girl frowned and turned to leave. I'm afraid of you. I don't want to die with you. That would be too much of a loss. She wasn't fast, but her figure was far away in an instant. Her aura fluctuated so that Baiji couldn't lock onto her with the sword on her back. Her face paled. Gritting her teeth, Baiji turned around and left. Her long dress was torn to shreds and fell to the ground. Before her naked body could come into contact with the air, she was covered by a white robe. She returned to her previous appearance, revealing only her eyes. Min Changjing's complexion could be said to be pale, and his heart filled with anger. He had no choice but to suppress it, but when he felt Qin Yu's road to the heavens suddenly turn, it was as if a bolt of lightning had struck him, nearly causing him to explode on the spot. What was the meaning of this? A straight road wasn't enough, and he had to go around in circles? Did he really not care about other people's cultivation? Thinking about how Qin nodded without hesitation when he tried to persuade him, Min Chongjing wished he could slap this little bastard in front of him and smash him to pieces. This deal wasn't going to happen. The angry old masterman was about to take back his hand. As for Qin Yu's road to heaven, if it became a dead end, then that was his own fault. If he wanted to blame someone, he should blame the madam who broke her promise. If you dare to stop, he will be the first to die. Little Meaty appeared out of thin air, holding Min Xiangtai in her hand. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes were cold. Min Chongjing was so angry that he laughed. "Madam, you broke your promise first. Do you really think I don't dare to risk my life?" Rumble. Black clouds appeared in the skies above Chongdao. They instantly piled up like a floating mountain, sprinkling down endless pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. This scene caused countless cultivators who fled Chongdao to subconsciously widen their eyes. They began to sweat profusely and then rejoice. Another one came. What kind of place was Chongdao? Big shots came one after another. It was fortunate that he had escaped in time. Otherwise, if he had fallen beneath the black clouds, he would have been squashed into a meat patty. But who could tell them what had happened in Chongdao? Why was there such a huge commotion? The sound of something tearing through the air whistled out, and it was actually a large ship that tore through the waves. Its speed was swift like a bolt of lightning as it pierced through the turbulent waves all along the way, and it actually didn't stop at all. County Governor. The cultivators of the various islands cupped their fists respectfully. It couldn't be helped. Right now, the world was ruled by the Western Wasteland Empire. Everyone on and off the mountain had to be afraid of the Western Wasteland Empire. No one dared to go against them. Otherwise, with just a single order, the Western Wasteland Empire's army would move out and form a formation to surround and kill them. It didn't matter if they were a great sect that had existed for thousands of years or a rebellious evil cultivator. They would all be killed. Similar things had happened many times in the past, and it was enough for the current cultivators to clearly see who had the biggest fist in the world. Swish, the wave-breaking flying ship stopped, and several figures flew out from it. The one in the middle looked dignified. Looking at the scene in front of him, he just frowned and looked gloomy, but he wasn't afraid at all. As the county governor of Thousand Islands Commandery, he patrolled the area on behalf of the emperor. He represented the face of the Western Wasteland Empire. Who dared to mess with him? However, the commotion in Chongdao was too big, so the county governor stopped halfway to ask. Otherwise, he would have ordered people to rush to the island and order the madman, who had disrupted the water transportation and caused such a big commotion, to surrender and wait for punishment. What on earth happened here? The county governor asked. If they could tell him one or two things, then they would have a little favor. In the future, as long as they didn't go too far, they would definitely get some benefits. But now, the people present looked at each other and scratched their cheeks anxiously, but no one could tell the slightest inside information. Unless the county governor was tired of living, no one dared to speak carelessly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be trying to make connections, but seeking death. The county governor's face darkened, and his thoughts raced. This was a bit unexpected. The island cultivators of Thousand Islands Commandery had always been well informed, but they actually didn't know the inside story of such a big commotion. And Chongdao happened to be a territory that he had personally sold for a sum of money a few years ago. Although most of it was handed over to the national treasury, the part that was kept made the county governor happy for a few days. But who would have thought that the big fortune that he had gotten would now become a hot potato? The county governor glanced at the commotion in Chongdao, gritted his teeth, and was about to send an order to mobilize the garrison in the commandery city. Otherwise, if things continued like this, once something big happened, he would be the first to get into trouble. But at this moment, the county governor frowned slightly. He flipped his hand and took out the official seal. As he probed it with his divine consciousness, his face suddenly changed. When he looked in the direction of Chongdao, he subconsciously showed deep awe. Taking a deep breath, The county governor's eyes flashed like lightning as he coldly swept over everyone. From this day forth, the area within 1,000 miles of Changdao is a restricted area designated by the imperial court. No one is allowed to peep in or take half a step inside. Otherwise, the laws of the nation will be ruthless. Everyone's hearts shook. They didn't dare to stay any longer. They all found excuses and fled far away. No wonder there was such a commotion. So it was related to the Western Wasteland's imperial court. Could it be that the imperial court's masters were here to kill the villains on the blood list? The county governor glanced at Changdao from afar. Let's retreat another few hundred miles. The flying boat howled away, not daring to stay any longer. And at this time, in Qin Yu's seclusion chamber, little Misty looked up at the sky. Her sneer deepened. Do you think I would be afraid? Min Changjing lightly said, Madam, you might not be afraid, but if you really do fight, it's hard to say what the result will be. Min Xiangtai will die. Marquis Zhongwu will also die. Little Misty narrowed her eyes. Then let's give it a try. She exerted a bit of force with her fingers. Min Xiangtai's neck suddenly emitted cracking sounds, and cracks began to appear. Faint traces of golden light began to emit from within. Blue veins popped up on Min Changjing's forehead. The golden light on his fingertips brightened, and the faint traces of Tao that flowed into Qin Yu's body rose 10 times over. It was like a mountain stream that suddenly swelled into a river, one that could wash away the stone embankments on both sides at any moment. Little Misty sneered. She opened her mouth and swallowed. From the cracks on Min Xiangtai's neck, golden light surged out. Stop! Min Changjing shouted out loud, his face twisted. Madam, there is no such reasoning in this world. Do you really want to force me to die together with you? Little Misty closed her mouth, allowing the golden light to float around her nose and mouth. If you were any slower, I really would have eaten him. Min Changjing clenched his teeth, not speaking. He knew that as long as he spoke, he would lose this life gambling game. But he didn't dare to gamble. For so many years, he only had this one son. If he were to be killed, what future would he have in the future? Little Misty faintly smiled. Now, we can rediscuss the contents of this transaction. Chapter 1643. Within the heaven-pulling sect, Qin Yu's body trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes. He looked down at his hands and raised them to pinch his cheeks. Then, he slowly pulled them outwards. Pain. This was real. He wasn't dreaming, and this wasn't an illusion. The 9 Melodies' heavenly palace. He had actually succeeded, just like that. Ah! Qin Yu cried out in pain and fell backwards. With a loud bang, his head smashed into the hard ground. He rolled around, his heart going crazy. Impossible! How could this be possible? How could there be such a terrifying cultivation in this world? Even if there was, those that could cultivate to this step were all old turtles. How could they be so stupid as to harm themselves to benefit others? Qin Yu couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, he cried out miserably. With a light cracking sound, his eyebrows split open and a shallow wound appeared. But to Qin Yu, it was like a ruthless knife had pierced through his soul. The pain was one aspect, but what was even more terrifying was that it involved life and death. Ignoring the pain of his soul splitting open, Qin Yu climbed up and kowtowed. Congratulations, Master, for completing the 9 Melodies' heavenly grand Tao. From now on, you can become a celestial being. There was no response. The crack between his eyebrows slowly healed. But not only was there no joy on Qin Yu's face, it was as if he had lost his parents. Just now, Qin Yu's main body had really moved to kill him on the spot. But it was worried that he had just completed the heavenly grand Tao, and killing him would cause instability, so it chose to temporarily keep the peace. In other words, once Qin Yu stabilized his realm and the heavenly grand Tao became as solid as a boulder, it would be the first one to kill him. If it were anyone else, they definitely wouldn't do this. A living world spirit embryo avatar would be an amazing boon to one's cultivation. But Qin Yu wasn't an ordinary person to begin with. Everything in the past had already proven this. Otherwise, how could he have found the world spirit embryo and successfully planted a soul? How could he have come out alive with that terrifying existence by his side? How could he have even completed the 9 melodies heavenly grandau? Just thinking about it was enough to make one's legs go numb, and they wished they could kneel on the ground instead of getting up. Chinyu stood up and sighed. He pulled at his hair. If he wanted to continue living, he had to do things seriously. At the very least, he had to let Chinyu know that being alive was the best outcome for him. As expected, as I lived, I became the person I hated the most in the past. In order to survive, I had to be busy all day and compromise all the time. I didn't have the time or the chance to truly enjoy life and embrace this world. The more he thought about it, the sadder he felt. Chinyu shed tears of sorrow. Changdao. Min Chongjing collapsed on the ground, his body drenched in sweat. He gasped for breath like a fish that had been scooped out of the water. His face was ghastly pale, his eyes were dim, and coupled with his current sorry state, all of it showed that he was extremely weak. Little Meat was sitting cross-legged not far away. Her face was just as pale, but at least on the surface, she seemed to be in a much better condition than Old Man Min. At this moment, she slowly opened her eyes and looked at Min Zhongjing. A glimmer of light flashed in the depths of her eyes. Lord Min turned his head and looked into her eyes. "Madam, this old man has really used all his strength this time. You won't go back on your word, will you?" Little Meat was silent for a moment. Then she faintly smiled. "Of course not. I have always abided by the virtue of keeping my word." She flipped her hand and took out a golden fragment. "I'll give this to you. We're even now." She casually tossed the exhausted Min Zhongjing to the side. Then his movements suddenly became vigorous, and he carefully caught the fragment. After carefully sensing it and making sure there wasn't anything wrong, he let out a long breath. His eyes were filled with resentment. "Madam, can you not scare me like that? If I can't catch it, wouldn't my heart explode from the pain?" Little Meat lightly said, "That's your problem." She looked at Min Zhongjing across from her and furrowed her eyebrows. The meaning in her eyes was clear. "Why are you still here?" With the item in hand, Min Zhongjing was in a slightly better mood, but he still choked a little. "Wasn't this my home? This woman, she was really unreasonable." Of course, he didn't dare to show any of this on the surface. He smiled and cupped his hands together. Then, he picked up the unconscious Min Xiangtai and respectfully withdrew. Bang, bang. The door to the room and courtyard closed one after another. His perception of the outside world was completely cut off. Of course, at this level of cutting off, Lord Min could still see it. But if he did so, he would clearly be discovered by the madam. He turned his head to look at the courtyard. Min Zhongjing's eyes flashed. He thought that the madam wouldn't be preparing to... She shouldn't be. Otherwise, why would she have paid such a great price to begin with? Looking at the unconscious Min Xiangtai, who had almost been eaten up just now, Lord Min couldn't help but be enraged. He fiercely tossed him away. But as soon as he let go, he felt an incomparable pain in his heart. He hurriedly raised his hand, slowing down the speed at which he fell. "Father, why are you here?" I am." As Min Xiangtai spoke, his complexion changed. He crawled up and rushed in front of Lord Min. "Where is Baiji? Where is Baiji?" "Father, let me tell you, you made me lose my fairy sister. If Baiji does this again, I won't forgive you." Min Zhongjing covered his face. This was really shameful. He raised his hand and slapped Min Xiangtai. Min Xiangtai was knocked out again. This kid was more pleasing to the eye when he was unconscious. Butler, the butler, who had been hiding somewhere, appeared in front of Min Zhongjing. He bowed respectfully. "Master, please give me your orders. Go. Send the young master back to his room. He won't wake up for a few days. Don't worry about anyone. After sending off the honored guest, I will deal with him." "Yes." The butler picked up Min Xiangtai and hurriedly left. He staggered and let out a bitter laugh. He raised his hand and rubbed his face with all his might. This time, although he had an unexpected harvest and was incomparably pleasantly surprised, he had still suffered a great loss. The 9 melodies, heavenly great Tao. Only he could grit his teeth and endure it. If it were anyone else, they would have long been turned into a dried corpse. This time, he had to go into seclusion for a few years to nourish his body. I'll lie, you bastard. Can't you see that I've come out? Are you ready? I'm about to die. Swish, space flashed, and old chef's figure appeared. He was hunched over and carried a golden net in his hands. Inside, there were many lively fish and shrimp. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the eyes of these fish and shrimp were filled with panic and despair. They were all great monsters that had gained spiritual wisdom at the bottom of the lake. At this time, they had been forced to reveal their true forms. As old chef swept his eyes over them, they froze in place. With loud thumps, they fell to the ground, fainting from fright. Is this all you've got? If you don't have anything better, just how long am I going to eat this? As he frowned, he reached out and grabbed the golden net. He didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but where old chef grabbed it, the golden net seemed to dim a bit. He grabbed a red prawn and twisted his fingers. The prawn instantly turned into a dark red thumb-sized pill that was swallowed in a single bite. Old chef rubbed his hands, a look of guilt on his face. I'm useless. Master, don't be angry. After the honored guest leaves in 2 days, I will go on a long trip and catch some great supplements for you. Old chef snorted and nodded. His hands didn't stop moving. After grabbing several times, the net was mostly empty. Only this old chef could eat monsters like jelly beans. If it were anyone else, they would either die from overeating or be corroded by their demonic energy. There were so many different water monsters, each with different demonic energy. If they were mixed together, it wouldn't be fun at all. But it was clear that neither old chef nor old chef were worried about this. After eating the last fish monster pill, old chef casually threw the golden net back. Hurry up and send me another batch. They aren't of much use, but it's better than nothing. Old chef hurriedly nodded and disappeared. For the next 2 days, the only thing old chef did was eat, eat, eat. He didn't know how many water demons he had eaten in the lake. Only when the demon-trapping formation within a radius of 100 miles had become sparse did Masterman slow down his feeding speed and casually toss them into his mouth one by one. His face looked much better and ruddy. It was clear that as long as there was enough food, he could more or less make up for the lack of quality. Old chef came again with a net full of fish and prawns. Looking at old chef eating weakly, his face was full of guilt. He thought for a while and said, Old chef, are you sure you don't want to try? That madam's condition might not be better than yours. If you can, not only can you recover your cultivation, but you can also improve further. By then, you might even become a truly perfect immortal. Old chef pondered and shook his head after a few breaths. Since that madam dared to let me sense her weakness, there's a possibility that it's an empty fort stratagem, but it's not very likely. I'm not willing to take the risk. Otherwise, I might be killed on the spot, even if I'm not perfect. That Grand Magus's heart was too troublesome. Otherwise, there might be a chance. Old chef sighed in his heart. Old chef, I'll remember you for creating trouble in the dark again and again. Little Meaty's faint voice rang out. Old chef frowned slightly. With a loud bang, old chef was sent flying all the way out of Long Island and landed in the demon-trapping array in the lake. The water demons, who were already scared out of their wits, smelled old chef's aura and desperately ran out as if they had gone crazy. They crashed into the demon-trapping array with a loud rumbling sound. Their heads were bleeding and their scales were broken, but they did not dare to stop or look back. A mouthful of blood was at the edge of his mouth, but old chef forcefully swallowed it back. Otherwise, if he really spat out this mouthful of blood, all the water demons in the demon-trapping array would die. Old chef still needed them to nourish his body, so he couldn't waste it like this. As for his own injury, because he forcefully swallowed this mouthful of blood, it would definitely worsen, but that was nothing. Old chef didn't care at all. It didn't matter if he died 2 days earlier or 2 days later. The little girl's future was settled. Right now, he was forcing himself not to die because he wanted to help old chef one more time. Otherwise, old chef would rather die earlier. There was no meaning in living. He leaped out of the water. Old Chef's demon-trapping array naturally wouldn't suppress him. He landed on the island, dripping wet. He coughed lightly and bowed respectfully. "Madam, this was all my idea. It has nothing to do with Old Chef. If you want to blame someone, blame me." "All right." Little Meaty laughed coldly and dispersed her aura. Chapter 1644. 3 days later, Qin Yu woke up. Every time he took a breath, he felt the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth converge on him. It flowed into his body like a trickling stream, increasing his strength. Although it was so weak that it was almost undetectable, the increase was real. Qin Yu sensed it with rapt attention and gradually understood the function of the 9 bends heavenly great path that Min Chongjing had helped him open. To put it simply, the current Qin Yu could be said to be a very, very large bottle that had already been built with a good foundation. But no matter how big the bottle was, as long as he continued to pour water into it, it would eventually fill up bit by bit. This confirmed that Qin Yu's future cultivation would be a matter of painstaking effort. He wouldn't have to work hard to comprehend and break through to the next realm by himself. As long as he accumulated enough, he would naturally cross the threshold of the immortal realm and become a member of the Emperor realm. Qin Yu's difficulty in reaching the Emperor realm had been reduced by more than half, but the remaining part wasn't easy either. Accumulation was a slow process. Even if Qin Yu was blessed by the heavens, it still wasn't enough to accumulate enough strength to cross the threshold of the Emperor realm in a short 30 years. Therefore, conventional cultivation methods wouldn't work. He had to find a new path. Whoosh! Exhaling, Qin Yu opened his eyes. Sitting across from him, Little Meaty was drinking tea. She glanced at him and nodded. "Not bad. But remember, no matter how good the path others have opened for you, it can't compare to walking your own path." She raised a hand to rub her forehead. "Plus, you're going to take a crooked path and pursue the fastest speed in your cultivation. There will definitely be problems with your foundation. Therefore, when you cross the threshold of the Emperor realm in the future, if you don't want to stop at the Great Path, you have to find a way to get rid of these problems." Qin Yu nodded. "I'll remember." Little Meaty stood up. "If there's nothing else, we're leaving. We've been here for too long. We can't stay any longer." She was also worried that if they stayed any longer, she wouldn't be able to resist eating the old chef who kept provoking her on the verge of death. Using his own life to force Min Chongjing to make up his mind and create a true immortal, this old thing was quite loyal. "Just wait and see. This isn't over yet. If there's a chance in the future, I don't mind going to Chongdao again to fulfill old chef's wish." Master Min's face was full of smiles as he welcomed Marquis Zhongwu and his 2 servants who came to say their goodbyes. He said that the Thousand Islands Commandery does have some beautiful scenery, and that the Marquis and Madam would like to stay for a few more days and go sightseeing on the boat. His words were extremely sincere. Qin Yu expressed his deep apologies. He said that he had important matters to attend to, so he couldn't delay any longer. Then he expressed his heartfelt thanks to Lord Min for opening up the 9 heaven-span Great Tao. This gratitude made Min Chongjing's face stiffen. If it wasn't for the madam standing behind you, this old man would have slapped you to teach you a lesson right now. Since you've taken advantage of me, don't try to show off. From start to finish, Little Meaty maintained her silence. As she watched Qin Yu and Min Chongjing exchange pleasantries with each other, a look of impatience gradually appeared in her eyes. Cough. Since Marquis and Madam have made up their minds, this old man will not try to persuade you any further. I wish you a safe journey. Little Meaty turned and walked away. Qin Yu smiled and bowed in return. Thank you for your blessings. At the pier, the boat that Min Chongjing had arranged was already ready. When the master and servants boarded the boat, it was like an arrow that had left a bow, whistling into the distance. The old chef's figure appeared once more. He quietly said, "Master, this madam left of her own accord. She had to endure it for a long time." The meaning behind his words could be understood. Min Chongjing rubbed his eyebrows. "There is no need to speak of this matter." He turned and left. "You old thing, Do you want to die so easily now? There is no such thing in this world. I'm still suffering, so you can accompany your master and continue tormenting him." The old chef was left alone. He looked in the direction of the boat, sighing and moaning. "Father, let's go back." The braided little girl appeared at the side. The old chef looked at his daughter. "Tell me, was I wrong?" The little girl said, "You weren't wrong." The old chef revealed a gratified expression. She was indeed my daughter. Her heart was still on my side. But before he could finish his thought, he felt a sharp stab in his heart. "Father, go and find master. Ask him if his previous promise still stands. If I am still young master's wife, I will do whatever you say. If there is a change, your daughter will call you father for the last time. In the future, we will be strangers. If we meet, I will break your leg." The old chef blinked his eyes. He looked at the serious little girl in front of him. She didn't seem to be joking at all. He felt as if there was a knife in his chest. He couldn't help but cry. On the boat, Chinyu let out a long breath. His tense body relaxed. He sat back in his chair and poured himself a cup of tea. With a gulp, 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 he drank it all in one go. Roro looked at him. Useless. Her face was full of disdain and disdain. Chinyu didn't care. He smiled and waved his hand. "Miss Ro's divine skills are invincible, and your cultivation is as high as the heavens. Of course, I am far inferior to you. That is why I am afraid of being implicated. This is human nature. I asked Miss Ro to understand and not lower herself to my level." Glib tongue. Ro sneered. She turned and entered the cabin. Chinyu faintly smiled. His heart was soft. Miss Ro had an invincible tongue. If she wanted to show off, then let her. In this sort of matter, if he wasn't willing to suffer a loss, then his head would be caught in a door, or he would be kicked by a black donkey. The trip to the Thousand Islands County seemed smooth and without any problems, but even Chinyu, who didn't have much contact with him, could feel dangers everywhere. It was like walking on tightrope. If he wasn't careful, he would fall and die a horrible death. As for Ro, the reason she made this trip was to help him open up the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road. This was something she had already decided upon when she arrived at the Heaven-Pulling sect, or perhaps even earlier. There were some things that Ro didn't say and Chinyu didn't mention, but that didn't mean that his heart was muddled. Chinyu took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He looked at the boundless waters in front of him, a complex look in his eyes. Min Changjing had helped him open up the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road. One didn't need to be a genius to know that he must have suffered heavy losses. If he hadn't received the reward, would he have been willing to lower his head and admit defeat? Chinyu didn't believe that such an unfathomable character wouldn't have the courage to fight. Ro must have paid a great price. And this price should be the reason why she was trying so hard to cover up her current weakness. After the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road was opened, Chinyu's perception abilities had become even stronger. It was only then that he was able to sense these clues. These were all favors. In just a short period of time, he seemed to have owed Ro a great debt. Chinyu reached out and grabbed the railing. He looked up into the skies. 9 suns shined above his head, illuminating the world since ancient times. The world was vast, far larger than he had ever seen. So, he needed to become stronger as soon as possible, stronger and stronger. He couldn't always be a little boy who only knew how to take without any reward. He stretched out his arm and clenched it into a fist. Chinyu waved it around and silently shouted out, "You can do it." An hour later, he turned and returned to his cabin. From this day onwards, Chinyu began to cultivate with an even crazier intensity than before. The intensity was astonishing, nearly without rest or sleep. Ro frowned as she watched him, reminding him that he didn't need to put in so much effort. According to Ro, she had already prepared a good heretical method. Although it wasn't the correct path, it was still quite brilliant. It was just that it wasn't ready yet. Once Chinyu learned it, the speed at which he could absorb heaven and earth's spiritual strength would rise. Chinyu believed Ro's words. Since she said this, then she must have made some preparations. But after he smiled, he continued to cultivate. "I know that the heretical method you prepared will surely have an astonishing effect. But you already reminded me about my unstable foundation. So, the more effort I put in, the better my foundation will become and the less hidden dangers I will face in my future cultivation. Roro didn't argue. She glanced at Chinyu, who continued to cultivate with his eyes closed and didn't urge him to rest again. There were some things that were always 100 times more precious than the advice of others. She wouldn't try to persuade Chinyu to give up. After leaving the Thousand Islands County, master and servant didn't pause at all. They hurried straight to the transmission array. As space violently shook, they vanished from sight. On this day, the Western Wasteland Imperial Capital received the final message regarding Chinyu and his two servants. Afterwards, the three of them were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no more news from them. The Western Wasteland Great Emperor thought for a moment and then ordered that there was no need to continue investigating. With the mysterious existence beside Marquis Zhongwu Chinyu, covering up their tracks was a simple matter. Moreover, since this person wanted to get rid of them, if they continued to tangle with him, it would be easy to send out the wrong signal. East Pole County City. Its name came from the great mountain at the base of the city. This was the East Pole Mountain. Most of this mountain was within the borders of the Western Wasteland. If one crossed over the summit and headed east, they would arrive at Jade Gate Pass. This Jade Gate Pass was an important area of the western borders of the Central Wasteland Divine Continent. It guarded the passageway and was said to be the most profitable business under the heavens. It had even reached the unsurpassed realm that all merchants dreamed of, lying down and making money until their hands cramped. If someone stood at the summit of the mountain and looked towards the eastern wasteland divine continent, they would discover that the eastern side of the mountain was covered in lush green trees. The trees were much taller than the western side of the mountain. This was a direct reflection of the difference in the richness of the heaven and earth spiritual strength. After all, there was naturally a reason why all sides in the world believed in the so-called divine continent. Today, the summit of the East Pole Mountain was still crowded with people. Their eyes were filled with enthusiasm and envy as they looked towards Jade Gate Pass. According to the borders, the summit of the mountain was still some distance away from Jade Gate Pass. But in order to show respect to the Divine Guardian, the summit was tacitly agreed upon as the final destination for the people of the Western Wasteland. Without permission, those that didn't hold a Jade Archive were not allowed to take another step forwards. A clamor of voices rose up from the base of the mountain. Everyone drew back, awe in their eyes. Several cold-faced youths stepped forwards, their clothes fluttering in the wind. Behind them were several soldiers in shining armor that dazzled the eyes beneath the sunlight. These people were calm and unruffled. Their eyes didn't look sideways, and their expressions were calm. They naturally exuded an awe-inspiring aura. The radiant armor was the standard armor of the Border Army at Jade Gate Pass. These soldiers didn't have a high status in the Jade Gate Pass. But even if there were some powerful Western Wasteland cultivators on this mountain peak that could kill them with a single finger, they didn't dare to act rashly. As for the group of youths they were guarding, they couldn't be provoked. For the Jade Gate Pass to send out radiant armor soldiers to accompany them, their background must be extraordinary. They were likely from a noble family within the borders of the Central Wasteland Divine Continent. Chapter 1645. A group of people silently walked over the mountain peak. Beneath countless envious and awe-inspiring gazes, they walked towards the sun-like Jade Gate Pass. Their figures gradually faded into the forest until they vanished from sight. The disciples of the Central Desolate. If I had to say, reincarnation really is a skill that tests one's skills. That's right. What is there to be arrogant about? It's just that their luck is better than ours. Sure. Everyone, be careful what you say. If the powerhouses of the Divine Prefecture hear what you say, you might provoke a disaster. A dark-faced youth frowned and said. After being reminded, the complexions of the several people changed. They shrunk back, not sensing anything wrong. They let out a sigh of relief. One of them bitterly smiled. We were just speaking on impulse. Thank you for the reminder, brother. Today, after experiencing the Jade Gate Pass and seeing the glory of the divine prefecture cultivators, we no longer have any regrets. After a brief pause, he cupped his hands together and said, "From your accent, you must be a local. I wonder if you can guide us to a good restaurant so we could drink a few cups together?" The person across from him hesitated for a moment and then nodded. "That's fine." The several people turned and left. These are the cultivators of the Central Desolate. They are truly superior people. Not too far away, a black-robed youth sighed with emotion. The woman beside him smirked, revealing a mocking smile. Although that person was a bit jealous, he wasn't wrong. When it comes to reincarnation, it is a very particular matter. Since the Central Desolate can be crowned with the name of the Divine Prefecture, how could it be an undeserved reputation? Since they are so mighty, they naturally have the confidence to do so. The maid beside her nodded. She never asked if the reason was right or wrong. As long as her madam said it, it must be true. Qin Yu revealed a helpless expression. "I didn't say anything, so why are you mocking me?" Little Meaty humphed. She turned and walked down the mountain toward the county city. Baiji fell behind. After a moment of hesitation, she said in a quiet voice, "Marquis, you have been busy cultivating every day." Before she finished speaking, she was interrupted. "You talk too much. Get back here." Qin Yu was enlightened. He quickly caught up and smiled. "I heard that tonight there will be an extremely lively lantern viewing festival in the county city. I just happen to be a bit tired from cultivating, so let's go together and take a look." Little Meaty's face was expressionless. She fiercely glared at Baiji, who had lowered her head to admit her mistake. With a cold face, she said, "I'm not going. Go. I've been cultivating all this way, and I'm about to suffocate. Miss Ro, please accompany me." Qin Yu's words were sincere. Ro sneered, but did not say anything else. That was her agreement. Qin Yu faintly smiled and glanced at Baiji. She lowered her head and remained silent. She did not say anything. At night, the Lantern Festival began in the county city. Lanterns were hung everywhere, illuminating the city even brighter than it was during the day. In order to attract the flow of people, the merchants who were rich and had great backing did not hesitate to spend a large amount of money to make a huge lantern that was over 100 feet tall. When it turned, it was truly magnificent. Although little Ro had a cold expression on her face, her eyes were still attracted to him, and she couldn't help but take a few more glances. When she discovered that Qin Yu was looking at her, she frowned and coldly snorted, turning her head away. Qin Yu smiled. "This is the first time I've seen such beautiful lanterns. If I don't take a few more glances today, I don't know if I'll ever see them again in the future. I will definitely regret it." Little Ro gnashed her teeth. She wished she could grab his ear and spin him around 3 times. Suddenly, Qin Yu's voice echoed in her ears. "That's enough. Let's not be angry. I know that you've been accommodating me this entire time, and that's my fault. Tonight, let's watch the lanterns. Once we pass through Jade Gate Pass, I promise to accompany you to that famous immortal-seeking tower and drink several jugs of God's nectar." Little Ro humped twice and then took advantage of this opportunity to step down. She thought that this brat Qin Yu, it would be great if he could always be so tactful. Yesterday, she had overheard several cultivators chatting. That scene hadn't been too remarkable, but he had actually remembered it. This was the key reason why her mood had improved. She looked up at the lanterns, her eyes sparkling. Qin Yu now understood why little Ro particularly liked bright objects. As he saw this, a soft light shined in his eyes. Baiji fell behind the two of them. She quietly glanced at them and then lowered her head. On the streets of the county city, a stream of people began to surge. It was a parade of lanterns, with many people clapping and cheering on both sides. They held all sorts of lanterns in their hands and constantly changed their postures. Most of them were young and beautiful women, dancing gracefully and gracefully. There were also tall and handsome young men who were striking their shields in a heroic manner. Clapping and cheering rose and fell. Many of them were directed at the men and women holding lanterns. Little Ro was initially interested, but soon she couldn't help but frown. She glared at Chinyu and said, "You're looking quite serious?" Then did you notice that the third one from the left is that little girl with long eyebrows? Her eyes are almost popping out of her head. Chinyu looked up in amazement. He looked around. Where? How come I don't see anything? Don't speak nonsense. That little girl is so beautiful. How could she possibly like me? He remained motionless, his eyes looking straight ahead. In the parade of lanterns, there was a girl with long eyebrows. She couldn't help but bite her lips. She had been standing in front of that man for a long time. Could it be that he didn't understand the meaning behind her eyes? However, he was like a block of wood, standing there motionless. Could the woman beside him be his wife? But the distance between the two of them didn't seem like it. Taking a deep breath, the girl with long eyebrows moved forward. The girls participating in the lantern parade were all chosen by the county city, so she was a bit arrogant. But for some unknown reason, after she walked over, her anger rapidly dissipated and she felt increasingly lost. The girl with long eyebrows didn't know what was wrong with her. She usually had high standards, so why was it that she suddenly found it hard to calm her emotions towards this young man? In his eyes, he was just an ordinary person. She couldn't help but turn her head and look at where the young man was standing. Then, she froze and was so angry that she nearly messed up her dance steps. He had been there just a moment ago, and now he had left. In such a short period of time, he must have turned around as soon as she took a step. Biting her lips, the girl with long eyebrows felt indignant. She really wanted to chase after that young man and ask him why he looked down on her. Did he really think that no one wanted girls like her who walked the lanterns? The bustling parade of lanterns went far away, with some busybodies following them. The scale of the parade grew larger and larger. Chinyu stood side by side with little Meaty. He pointed a finger at a shop that was making large red flowers. "It's too noisy and annoying. I think that these quiet lanterns are better to look at. Moreover, they are bright red and festive." A waiter was standing at the entrance of the shop, trying to attract customers. He was originally annoyed that most of the people had been drawn away by the parade of lanterns. But as he heard these words, he immediately smiled and gave a thumbs up. "Sir, you seem like a sensible person. You must have read many books." Chinyu smiled and cupped his hands together. "I haven't read many books. I could just barely recognize a few words." The waiter was in charge of welcoming customers. Although he didn't have much skill, his eyesight wasn't bad. After looking around several times, his smile became increasingly warm. "My shop has been passed down for hundreds of years and is a reputable old shop with a good conscience. All sorts of immortal treasures are of high quality and low price. How about you go in and take a look?" Chinyu looked at the large red lanterns at the entrance. He thought for a moment and nodded. "That's fine. I'm a bit tired from walking, so I might as well go in and take a stroll. I might as well take a break and drink some tea." Little Meaty nodded. The waiter turned and shouted, "3 honored guests, please come in." Chapter 1646. The Red Lantern shop wasn't small at all. The grand and extravagant first-floor hall was illuminated by countless crystal lamps, making it seem as bright as day. It was clear that because the lantern procession had drawn away the original customers, the grand hall was now empty. Several female cultivators in the shop were whispering to each other. One of them had a worried expression, and the others seemed to be comforting her. Hearing the commotion outside and seeing a guest arrive, several female cultivators in the shop spread out a bit and politely bowed. "Welcome, honored guest." It was normal for female cultivators in the shop to act as guides and answer customers' questions. Just as Chinyu was about to point at someone, Meaty suddenly said, "Why don't you introduce them?" The female cultivator that was chosen smiled and nodded. "Yes, guest." She was born beautiful, and her skin was especially white. It was clean and flawless, as if she were the most beautiful jade in the world. Chinyu glanced at her. He felt that there was something wrong with this female cultivator's skin color, and her aura was a bit too weak. As for more, it was likely that this female cultivator's eyes were especially beautiful. They were clear and bright, round and flawless. As if sensing Qin Yu's gaze, the female cultivator lowered her head. She reached out a hand and gestured. "May I ask what 3 honored guests need?" She stepped forwards and quietly moved to Meaty's side, putting some distance between herself and the only male customer. Meaty's lips curved up. She glanced at Qin Yu and saw him rub his nose helplessly. Her mood immediately improved, and she smiled. "I don't have anything I want to buy in particular, so I'll just casually stroll around." The female cultivator in the shop wasn't disappointed by this. Her voice remained respectful as she smiled and said, "Then I will lead several honored guests to stroll around the first floor hall. As for the second and third floors, they are for sale. If there is anything you need, please feel free to tell me." This was a shop called Shiyu. It sold items used by cultivators and was also referred to by the world as mountain items. There were high and low grades, and most of them were clearly marked with a price tag. This was the so-called "you got what you paid for." In Qin Yu's eyes, although there was a bit of a premium, it could be considered fair. When he tried to attract business, he said that it was a shop that had been around for hundreds of years, but that shouldn't be too much of an exaggeration. She was truly just casually strolling around. Never did she expect that little Meaty would actually take a fancy to an item. She did not say anything. However, the slight pause in her gaze was already enough. Qin Yu stopped and followed her gaze. He saw a thumb-sized stone placed atop the red silk jade box. Its surface was blue and white, but it didn't seem mixed at all. Rather, it gave off a feeling of perfect harmony, smooth and flawless. Specks of starlight sprinkled out and shone on the jade box. It immediately refracted a gorgeous halo, giving off a mysterious charm. Qin Yu pointed a finger. "What is this stone?" Although the female cultivator leading the way was afraid, she didn't show it on her face. She respectfully said, replying to customers' question, "This stone is called the Sun-Moon Stone. By chance, it absorbed the essence of the sun and moon. It took more than 1,000 years for it to form. During the day, the hall was as bright as a lamp, and at night, there were millions of stars sprinkling down. It was incomparably mystical. Moreover, this object was refined by a refining master and can absorb the essence of the sun and moon. If you carry it with you, it will have a calming effect. Moreover, it can condense a drop of the essence of the sun and moon every month. After taking it, it can enhance your soul cultivation." As she spoke, it was clear that she had put in a lot of hard work in her daily life. Qin Yu glanced at little Meaty's expressionless face. He faintly smiled. "We'll take it." The female cultivator leading the way was overjoyed. Out of all the treasures on the first floor, the Sun-Moon Stone was one of the few that sold for the highest price. But besides the fact that it was made from decent materials and could produce phenomena of the sun and moon, the so-called calming effect and the drop of essence of the sun and moon every month were in truth quite useless. Cultivators that could afford to buy a Sun-Moon Stone simply looked down on it. If it was just for appearance, there were plenty of immortal artifacts that had similar effects, but their value would only be 1/10 of its original value, or even lower. In short, if she sold this Sun-Moon Stone, according to the rules of the store, she would receive a dividend. This would be able to slightly alleviate her family's current predicament. The female cultivator suppressed the joy in her heart and didn't reveal anything on her face. Her smile became a bit more sincere. "Does guest wish to continue choosing and settle the payment at the end, or would you like to settle the transaction now?" Qin Yu said, "Let's settle the transaction now." Little Meaty's lips curved up. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded out. "Hold on, I've also taken a fancy to this stone." Several people walked in from the entrance. The one who spoke was a young man in the middle. He wore white robes, and if it weren't for the fact that he exuded an arrogant and overbearing aura, his appearance would have been quite good. Beside him was a pink-dressed female cultivator. She pointed at the Sun-Moon Stone and hugged his arm. Her body swayed back and forth as she coquettishly pouted. The white-robed young man faintly smiled. "Don't worry. Since it's something you've taken a fancy to, I will naturally take it." He opened his folding fan and gently waved it several times. Everyone, Since it was something you took a fancy to first, I am willing to increase the price by 30% as compensation to you. Seeing the white-robed young man, the complexion of the female cultivator in the store changed. But as she heard these words, she relaxed. She quickly winked at the three customers. "Little Sister Sue, we meet again today. Why are you winking at me? If you want to speak, then just say it. I won't blame you." The female cultivator took a deep breath and bowed. "Surly has an honorable status, and I am only a lowly person in a swamp. I am not worthy of such a title." She didn't say anything more, but the three customers could definitely sense her warning. This was all Sue Giroux could do. The white-robed young man, surnamed Lee, faintly smiled, not minding at all. "Everyone, since little sister Sue has spoken, then I will show a bit more sincerity. I will increase the price by 50%, and you may leave after receiving the money. This is a great deal for you." Chin-Yu lightly said, "I apologize. We have also taken a fancy to this sun-moon stone and have no intention of transferring it." Within East Pole County City, the Lee family's second young master, Yuan Tai, narrowed his eyes. "I didn't expect you to be such a bold outsider, and your appetite isn't small either. But I'm in a very good mood today. I will double the price, take the money, and obediently leave. I will pretend that nothing happened today." The implication was that if they didn't know what was good for them, they would remember this matter. This Lee family's second young master was truly a despicable person. Even his threats were laid out in the open. Chin-Yu glanced at Meaty from the corner of his eyes and saw that she was still expressionless. He understood what was going on and couldn't help but sigh. If a local snake provoked a major city, then there would be trouble. Although at worst he could kill them with a single punch, it was inevitable that he would be stained with blood. "Sorry." It was only these two words, but the meaning was clear. Li Yuantai smiled. He opened his folding fan once more. "Three outsiders, this sun-moon stone is yours. Remember to close the door before going to bed so that you don't fall into a thief's trap. Not only will you lose your treasure, but you might even lose your head. Young Master Lee, these three are my honored guests. Please be lenient with your words and don't ruin your reputation." A blue-clothed old man smiled and cupped his hands together. He was incomparably friendly, but a sharp light surged in his eyes. Li Yuantai closed his folding fan and cupped his hands together. "Shopkeeper Zhou, I didn't know that you were personally here today. It was this junior who spoke rudely and offended you." He winked at the master and servants. "I was just joking before, so don't take it seriously. Our East Pole County City's Lee family has always been very hospitable." He smiled and turned to leave. The pink-dressed woman beside him lowered her head, not saying a single word. Before she left, she couldn't help but glare at him, her face paling. Shopkeeper Zhou took several steps forwards. He smiled and said, "Three honored guests, I apologize for disturbing you." He hesitated for a moment and then turned to say, "I will give you a 20% discount on this sun-moon stone. However, as for your dividends, you should follow the normal accounts. Just inform the accountant later." Su Zhiruo revealed a grateful expression and respectfully nodded. Chin-Yu thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and said, "Then I must thank Shopkeeper." "Shopkeeper," Zhou bowed in return. He smiled and turned to leave. "Wait a moment." Chin-Yu lifted a hand and pointed to the second floor. "I have some items that I want to sell. I wonder if Shopkeeper would be willing to take a look." Shopkeeper Zhou glanced at the calm master and servants in front of him. His thoughts stirred and he smiled. "Esteemed guests have come to visit and are willing to do business at our store. That is already giving us a high opinion of ourselves. So how could I possibly refuse? Please follow me." Little Meaty said, "You can go. I want to walk around a bit more." Chin-Yu nodded. "That's fine." Shopkeeper Zhou didn't have any objections. He reached out a hand and led Chin-Yu straight to the second floor. Little Meaty glanced at Su Zhiruo. "Let's walk around a bit more." Su Zhiruo respectfully nodded. She led the madam and continued to walk around the hall on the first floor. After introducing 3 or 4 items, she hesitated again and again. She couldn't help but lower her voice and say, "Esteemed guest, if you have friends or relatives in the county city, it would be best if you don't live outside. or it would also be good to leave as soon as possible. Little Meaty glanced at her and smiled. We will consider it. Sujuruo had an anxious look on her face, but, strictly speaking, this reminder was too much. She sighed inwardly and didn't say anything more. Baiji followed behind, a puzzled look in her eyes. She didn't understand why the madam treated this female cultivator so differently. But after suffering so many slaps and kicks, she had finally become a bit smarter. She knew that she shouldn't ask about matters that she didn't know. On the second floor, the white-haired appraiser saw a shopkeeper Zhou and Qin Yu enter. He stood up and welcomed them. "Shopkeeper, why did you personally come? If there was anything you needed, you could have just called me." Shopkeeper Zhou waved his hand. "Esteemed guest, there are some items you wish to sell. I will personally handle this matter, so I'll borrow your place." The appraiser smiled and nodded. "I see. Then I'll be lazy and go drink some tea." As he spoke, he cupped his hands together towards Qin Yu. Then he gathered up his things and walked out. Shopkeeper Zhou sat down in the appraiser's seat. He gestured with his hand and said, "Esteemed guest, please sit. I am Zhou Yinshan, the shopkeeper of this store. I am responsible for all matters." His expression was solemn. He slowly said, "May I ask what this esteemed guest wishes to sell?" "Esteemed guest, please rest assured that my Shiyu store has been in business for several hundred years and will keep the items in my hands a secret. Whether the transaction is successful or not, I will not reveal anything to the outside world." To this, Qin Yu believed it. If he didn't even have this much credibility, then let alone having been in business for several hundred years, he feared he would have been torn down long ago and the signboard would have been chopped up to be used as firewood. Unfortunately, he had many items on hand and wasn't prepared to sell them. Qin Yu faintly smiled. He cupped his hands together and said, "Today is the county city's lantern festival, and there are several shops that hang red lanterns at their doors. But the one at Shiyu store's entrance is the largest, so we came here." Shopkeeper Zhou frowned. "Esteemed guest, you aren't planning to sell it?" Qin Yu nodded. "We are the buyers." "Esteemed guest, what do you wish to buy?" "The red lanterns at the entrance are quite good. I wonder if there are any similar ones that can be viewed in the future." Shopkeeper Zhou lifted a hand, indicating for the guest to wait. He walked to the door and slapped it against the wall. Faint traces of light flashed. In the blink of an eye, the entire room was covered, forming a small world of its own. Shopkeeper Zhou quickly walked back, his expression solemn. "Since esteemed guest knows the inside story of the red lanterns, you must be someone in the circle. So, I will get straight to the point. How many do you want?" Qin Yu stretched out 3 fingers. Shopkeeper Zhou frowned. "Does esteemed guest know the price?" Qin Yu reached out a hand and gestured several times on the table. Shopkeeper Zhou hesitated for several breaths of time. Then he slowly said, 3 clearance tokens. Looking at the entire county city, there are only a few that can do this. Our Shiyu store does indeed have this ability. But esteemed guest should know that the world is ever-changing and accidents can occur at any time. So, I cannot give you an absolute guarantee on this matter. I will need some time to prepare. Esteemed guest, please leave behind a place to stay. Once the matter is confirmed, I will inform you as soon as possible so as to avoid any delays." Qin Yu nodded. "There are still 10 days before the gate opens. There is no rush. As for where I will be staying, I have yet to confirm. Once I have settled down, I will inform shopkeeper." Shopkeeper Zhou frowned, a strange expression on his face. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He pointed a finger outside the door. "These matters have always been decided by my family's madam. Shopkeeper, there is no need to worry. I will leave behind a deposit. I will have to trouble you to handle it." Shopkeeper Zhou smiled. "Thank you for your understanding." He thought for a moment and continued to say, "The Li family's second young master Li Yuantai has always been a narrow-minded person. Esteemed guest, please make some preparations to avoid any complications." Qin Yu cupped his hands together in thanks. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.